Oh, hey there. Welcome to the Ope-Eh three-way pro wrestling podcast. As always, I'm Brandon, joined by my good buds, Donny and Pierce. And boys, it's Wednesday, and you know what that means.
It's another recording of the Ope three-way podcast. Am I right?
And
Come on, Don. We got this on the agenda today here.
uh,
You know.
yeah. We got to talk about AEW Dynamite and AEW
Hey.
other stuff. Yeah, we got a bunch.
Eh.
Yeah, we got a bunch to cover. And we're gonna get right into it. Well, we're gonna talk about the big news that came out of AEW today in regards to their new TV deal. Finally, feel like we were blue balled on that for months, but we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about Beyond This Day as usual. We're going to talk about our top five favorite, at least favorite, moments in the 5 years of AEW, as that's their
least
5 year
favorite is
anniversary.
Donny.
Yeah,
least
of course
favorite
it
is
is.
Donny.
Yeah. Since it's our 5 year anniversary tonight, we're going to go into Bad Blood predictions. And then the meat is going to be on the second half of the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix. So a lot to cover.
Well, actually, the meet was on Monday with the last meet standing match.
That's true. That was a banger. That was a great match.
God bless the meaty boys. And that was a great way to end the, for now, 3-hour saga of Monday Night Raw. That was the perfect way to end that.
Although, unfortunately, I guess Braun Strowman got hurt. Did you guys hear this?
I did not hear that.
His groin. Yeah.
Apparently tore his groin.
Shit. He just got better, too. He hadn't been back that long.
Luckily, a torn groin is like, although it sounds like horribly painful, I think it's only like a 6-week recovery time, if I remember correctly. Like, it's not that big of an injury, depending on how bad it is.
I'd seen somebody... Sorry, go ahead.
It just sucks because it slows his momentum. And Braun had been kind of out of the picture for a while, and they were just really starting to figure out what to do with him since he had come back.
Yeah.
But like this, I feel like even a short amount of time could really slow momentum. So hopefully they have something strategically placed for him for when he gets back. Because this way this thing fell into place with Bronson was just mint, like lightning in a bottle almost. Like this is going to be a definitive 2024 feud, I think, and right on the tail end of the year too.
Yeah, I would say it's one of the top TV feuds at the very least. One that didn't really get into any PLE or pay-per-view time, but it was right. Very solid for the few weeks that it was on television. He did look quite slow in the match. I guess he had already injured it at the point that I saw. There's someone tweeted, I can't remember who, but highlighted how slow he was, like running in the ring, and there was some commentary about his knees being shot. But I guess that would kind of align that it was his groin that was bothering him. He had basically no mobility in the match. Hopefully he gets better soon. He just came back from that head injury too.
Boy.
Yeah. He just had that head injury not too long ago, and he came back from that only a few months ago. So hopefully he's able to recover pretty quick. Him and Ilya too. Man, that was bad news.
God, that was such a bummer.
Yeah, they were really setting up for a Judgment Day feud there, maybe a Finn Balor feud. But
however, he did walk out on his own power, and I think that shows quite a bit. So hopefully it's not as bad as it seems. And, well wishes to both of them and heal up quick.
Absolutely.
Unbesiegbar, unbreakable. If we get that John Cena-like recovery time.
Hopefully. Who would like to plug socials for today?
I think it's got to be Brandon.
Sure, I could do so. I mean, of course, you're here with us on Spotify, right? So make sure you give us a follow, give us a rating. Hey, even leave us a comment or two if you really feel like it. I mean, we're a pretty receptive bunch, I say, so we like to engage with our fans. As you can tell, we're also on Facebook. Might troll you, might start a little flame war here and there, but it's all in good fun, and we like to talk us some wrestling with all you fine folks. So follow us on Spotify and Facebook.
Wrong opinions.
I didn't notice you shit on Cody this week, so I think we're good for now. We're not canceled yet.
We're going to be put on the fence maybe once or twice, boys, but that's part of the fun, yeah. That's the way I see it anyhow. And, of course, you can follow us on X, Twitter / the Musk Machine. Also, we follow live programs, live pay-per-views. Like to engage with you folks on that as well. So if you want to give us a follow, give us a like, and join us along for this wonderful pro wrestling journey that we be on. That's about all I got to say about that.
Yeah, we'll be tweeting
on
bad
X,
blood.
I apologize, Donnies, but on X we did just have like the greatest person to ever follow us in Donny.
Yeah. Figured it was, hey, I shilled the podcast on a Fightful tweet, okay? That took a lot of, like, disdain for me to... No, I'm just kidding. I think that the people at Fightful do pretty good work. I might disagree with some of their opinions, but they...
Part.
Yeah, I disagree with some of their opinions at times, but I think they do quite a bit of good work when it comes to reliable news coming out of wrestling. So had to shout us out on Fightful. But yeah, now I do follow it on my normal Twitter account. So bully for me and bully for us.
Real Dear Diary day when Donnie followed us on the X.
So
proud.
Oh boy.
Moving on. So today, big news came out from Tony Khan and AEW that finally, after what seemed like 84 years, they signed the new agreement with HBO, HBO Time Warner, to renew their TV rights on TNT and TBS. Details aren't officially posted, partly because it's a private company, partly because TBS and TNT hasn't got around to it yet. But the speculation from my scene is 3 years, around 170 million, with an option for a 4th year. Included in that is starting in 2025, simulcasting, I guess that would be, of Dynamite and Collision on Max, and as well later in 2025, quote unquote discounted rates on pay-per-views through Max. What that discount is, nobody knows. I assume it's going to be like $5 and it won't matter, but we'll see. Thoughts on the news out of AEW?
I think this is great for wrestling as a whole. You know, I've been an AEW fan since the start. It's nice to see them stay where they began. It's nice to see wrestling on Turner networks, even if, you know, Turner's been gone for a long time. And I mean, getting simulcast on Max. Shout out to my sister Abby. She's giving me her Max password because I gave her my Peacock information.
Hey.
I mean, she's I'm going to pay for it like a good U.S. citizen. Cough, cough. It's good for wrestling, and the discounted pay-per-views, that is what it is. But at least, you know, it's better than paying $60-$70 a month versus, you know, probably, I would assume they're probably going down to 30 to 20 to 30. So
yeah, it sounds reasonable. That seems kind of like a Triller price or like a Bleacher Report kind of price for like a. Well, I mean, not to get too far down another road, but like, you know, you got Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling that's going to be coming out here soon for around that price range. So figure if you're already paying the sub price for like a Max, which I had to discontinue it because it's just a lot to juggle with everything else as far as life expenses now. But I mean, if you can swing Max and then, you know, reap the benefits of a sliced, shall we say, AEW pay-per-view price, hey, all the better. Yeah, I agree with you there, Pierce. I think for pro wrestling, it's great. I think it's great that AEW is not staying too far behind the trend that most media these days is going. I'm glad that they got this opportunity to kind of prove their worth in the market and to continue to grow. I hope this means some good things for Ring of Honor also. I mean, I'll always stand up for Ring of Honor whenever I get a chance to, but given the fact that it's under Tony's umbrella now, I would hope that they reap some benefit as well. I feel like the company, and I've said this multiple times, could stand to really hash out its own identity now that AEW is firmly on solid ground and has kind of had its own thing going. So, and there's a lot of people who could use the exposure and the work, and the space to grow their characters and to expand on their ring work. So I feel like Ring of Honor, in the spirit of Ring of Honor, is a great foundation for that. Always has been, but I feel like this is, there's plenty of new opportunity to be gleaned from this for Ring of Honor as well.
I mean, I don't want to be a hater, but I can't help myself. I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think anything that was mentioned had brought up Ring of Honor. I don't know if there's any sort of Ring of Honor thing as a part of it. They still have what's their streaming service called for Ring of Honor that nobody subscribes to?
Honor Club.
Yeah.
Honor Club, yeah. I know.
They didn't talk about that at all. I don't want to be skeptical, but it definitely seems like it's an afterthought, and I wouldn't.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I like to hold out hope, anyways.
I know you're a fan, and I don't want to shit on your fandom because that's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm very pessimistic to their use of the license since it's been acquired in basically every capacity. And that'll be doubled down if Jericho becomes 2-time Ring of Honor World Champion. So,
oh God, please no. I have been dreading that match and its impending nature since it was announced, or since it was inferred, since it was hinted at strongly by the roots of the learning tree, the trunk, and the dead leaves and the dirty ground and all that. Okay. Anyways.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. I think to reiterate the points there, it is good for wrestling as a whole to have an alternative that is paying wrestlers to entertain fans. That's first and foremost the good news out of it. So keeping AEW on TV is good for the business, good for you guys. I'll tune in here and there. Hopefully I don't tune in on the bad episodes, but we'll see how those go. And we'll see what happens. The term is a little bit interesting to me, only 3 years. I think I'm curious. I won't say I think. I'm curious who decided on that. If that was Tony Khan who wanted it for a shorter term, or if that was HBO that wanted it for a shorter term.
More than likely HBO, I would think.
That would be my speculation. But 3 years, that does finish their term with the 4th year option. After Peacock is done their rights, but before the 5 years that Netflix can opt out of. So I guess depending on how the Netflix WWE landscape works, they would then have first rights to cable again for their main program being televised elsewhere if there's more demand for wrestling due to it being on Netflix. So I think that's an interesting point there. But we'll see what happens. I guess now the next thing we'll do is talk about on this day. So, Pierce, if you want to hit us with what happened on October the 2nd at some point in history.
So, one of the things I actually found out today, I was watching Wrestling with Regret. He was doing a video on Jericho being underused in WCW. Apparently, 34 years ago on this day, he debuted. So, happy anniversary to Chris Jericho.
Wow.
Yep.
2006 Raw.
Hold on, just back to that point. Yeah, I think Brandon was going to say something.
Oh no, I was just kind of musing on the fact that he was underused in WCW. I know he was underappreciated, but underused, yeah, that's interesting.
Underappreciated. I mean, he hit the glass ceiling that was there. It's
absolutely.
Yeah, he was never going to hit the peak.
WCW should be its own episode or series, realistically, because there's a lot that we could go into for it.
Oh, another episode on the faults of WCW. Awesome.
I think the best way to recognize 34 years in the business is to give him the ROH World Championship. What do you think, guys?
That's a terrible idea. He should retire.
Yeah, I am firmly behind that notion.
Oh, guys.
You should also cut his hair. Damn, hippie.
But all right, what else? Let's talk about the Intercontinental Championship, the title that he held still to this day the most out of anybody. In 2006 on on a Monday Night Raw, Jeff Hardy defeated Johnny Nitro to become the Intercontinental Champion.
Speaking of the Intercontinental title, they added blue to the belt this week.
And it looks gorgeous.
It does look pretty sweet
pops,
with the
it's
blue.
so good.
It harkens back to old titles.
A little bit of
I like how they
title.
I feel like they managed to maintain that same shade of blue throughout multiple iterations of the Intercontinental Championship. Looking back, like on the Attitude Era one, and then obviously the classic Intercontinental Championship. And I mean, you can see little spackles of even previous generations within the shape and the design of the current Intercontinental Championship too. And I don't want to expand too much on that because we got a lot to cover. But overall, like I thought, it's crazy, like just what the addition of a little bit of color, a little bit of something can do to the overall presentation of a bigger body. Like it was fine before. People were shitting on the new Intercontinental Championship. I thought it was just fine. I thought it looked good for what it is. But then when you just spackle that bit of blue in the globes there, it's like a whole new belt, and everybody's excited about it now. So,
I mean, you compare that to the NXT titles that they debuted last night.
Yeah,
kind of boring.
Yeah,
kind of boring.
Not a fan of the silver era. Not a fan of the silver era of NXT. I'm sure the wrestling will be fantastic.
Yeah, but last night's show was a pretty good show.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
What else we got?
The blue to me in the Intercontinental Championship, it kind of harkens back to the Big Eagle in my eyes. Has that splash of blue.
Cody's been pitching for that to come back too, so you never know.
We'll see. But speaking of the WWE Championship, we're going to go ahead to 2011. Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. The Awesome Truth interfered in a Hell in a Cell match to help Alberto Del Rio regain the WWE Championship in a triple threat. That included CM Punk and John Cena.
Wow.
Not too much else happened on this card. Go ahead, Donny.
Miz is making bad decisions then. He's making bad decisions now.
I don't know if it was a bad decision for him to turn on R-Truth. I mean, everything.
No one is allowed to turn on R-Truth. He is a treasure and must be protected at all times.
Definitely will not argue that point. Still my run for oldest WWE champion. Give it another couple of years, boys.
It won't happen, but you can hold out your hope.
Hey, Money in the Bank exists. Anything can happen.
Theory getting the title. You can go hand in hand, side by side.
Absolutely. I will die on that hill.
All right, this has been the Ope-Eh three-way. I'll see you next time.
Give it. I'm just saying, boys. I'm going to keep saying.
Keep saying.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I will.
But we're going to kick back 5 years ago today. The inaugural AEW Dynamite took place. I would say it was a monumental success. They had over 1 million viewers.
Most viewers they ever had.
No. They had when Punk was there, they hit 1 million a few times.
I thought the first episode was the highest viewed episode ever. It's like 1.3, no?
I don't know for sure. I know they hit over 1 million. Couple of the matches on the card. Cody, no last name, defeated Sammy Guevara. Pac defeated Hangman Page. Rio defeated Nyla Rose to become the inaugural AEW Women's Champion, which she needs to be used more now. Rio is an incredible talent, and she's just kind of there. The main event, the Inner Circle, Chris Jericho, AEW World Champion at the time, Chris Jericho, and Proud and Powerful, aka LAX, Santana Ortiz, defeated the Elite, and after the match, it had the debut of the greatest wrestler in the world.
Chris Jericho?
No.
Oh, is it Jake? Is it Jake Hager?
Oh, it sure is.
Oh.
Unfortunately, he didn't have his hat then, but
yeah, his hat's where all of his character comes from.
In the last couple of years of his AEW career, that was the only thing he did.
That's his gimmick, man.
That episode had a 0.68 rating as the highest rated AEW Dynamite show ever. So,
and it makes sense.
All downhill from there, boys.
Well, why don't we talk about the top 5 moments or dishonorable moments for Donnie's list in Dynamite history, because it's the 5-year anniversary today.
Do we want to go like year by year? Do we want to just everybody says their list? What do we want to do?
I feel like it's all subjective, right? We can kind of roast or agree depending.
Brandon, you went year by year, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there was a lot that was packed into AEW even within its 5-year time span. And I mean, let's face it, you have some years that are just better than others. You can't really dispute all that much.
Worse than others.
Yeah, I mean, 2021 versus 2023, perfect example.
Yeah, 2021. It's going to be hard for them to top that year.
No, it's chock full. And I mean, like 2023 on the other end of it was like the only year where I looked at a lot of what was going on Dynamite specifically, and I'm like, there's really not a hell of a lot to parse through here as far as like all-time great Dynamite stuff.
It's funny because most of the cringe stuff that I'm going to cover was in 2020 and 2021. There was a lot less cringy stuff as time went on. Maybe they were becoming self-aware that they had to have less crap. But
they also featured a lot more, Canadian talent, shall we say, and Edge and Christian. At least I feel like towards the later half of the year. I think that's when. I should say Adam Copeland.
Yes.
I feel like that's when
the legend.
Yes.
Rated R Superstar is also appropriate to use in AEW.
But who wants to kick off the list? Donnie, do you want to go negative first, or should we?
Sure. I'll do the hater moments here. So, 2020, I actually had 3 moments listed in 2020. I kind of want to say them all, but the one that I found to be the most awkward was when Jake Roberts straddled Brandy in the middle of the ring and placed a giant snake on top of her. And it was very uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, but he's Jake the Snake.
Yeah, but that was a gimmick from like 30 years ago. And people didn't really like it then. No, it doesn't.
I love Jake the Snake Roberts, dude. That was such a great... No one else was doing crazy stuff like that at the time.
Oh.
And his debut promo on Dynamite was fucking fire. It was so good.
There was nothing wrong with that promo, but him standing like literally on top of Brandy with a giant boa was very weird and very negatively received on social media from what I was looking at. Couple other segments there, just really quick, was Matt Hardy teleporting on the first pandemic episode of Dynamite.
But that wasn't regular Matt Hardy.
Yeah.
That was broken Matt.
This is how I'm expecting this to go. And Jericho and MJF sing along. That was trash.
That was awesome. It was so great.
Wow. Okay. So we know how much of a mark you are.
That was one of those things I feel. Okay. So that was great in the sense that it called back to, one of those little things that made MJF famous when he was on the Rosie O'Donnell show, and everyone likes to give him shit about it, but he owns it. And he's actually not he doesn't got half bad pipes. I'll say that. And then also, like, obviously you pair him with Jericho, singer of Fozzy, so you kind of, poke at that too. And think of like what AEW is trying to do at the time. AEW is trying to be like a trendsetter. They're trying to be an alternative and stand apart. And I feel like there wasn't really, maybe they were starting to tap into it more, like within like the COVID era with like the crazy stuff they would do with like the Wyatt House of Fun or whatever the hell they had going on at WrestleMania. But I felt like stuff like that was just like, it was good. It was entertaining, and it fulfilled the purpose that it set out to achieve, I feel.
Well, you guys are I remember on that.
To this day, I'll say this. To this day, I still remember it. And if I remember it and I'm not just like, thinking about it as I'm watching AEW and changing the channel or like just boycotting it altogether, I feel like that is a win in of itself, personally.
You guys have lower standards than I do. I don't watch professional wrestling for sing-alongs.
Well, maybe Brandon is my shadow.
Could be.
My shadow and me.
Well, what do you watch pro wrestling for there, Don? Out of curiosity, since you brought it up.
The matches, primarily, because that's
real gramps.
But
you're a work rate guy.
No, I'm not. I'm actually not. But the storylines that tie into the matches are the thing, and like storylines can come in all different shapes and sizes, and I get that, but there's certain points where it's like when you have the birthday segment or the wedding segment or the celebration segment, and they're all always filled with like interference and dumbassery. That stuff I could miss that stuff and I wouldn't care. And I think that's where that falls in, right? Like they're all just it's not. I like a little bit more of the intensity. I like a little bit more of the deviousness that comes through, and like a little sing along like that just doesn't cut it for me. So
no, that's fair.
So you didn't care for the Rock concerts 1 through 3?
No, because there was a lot more actual there was humor in that. They were like specifically scripted for a negative purpose. Like that one that he cut on Vicky was classic.
So mean.
Right? Like it brings a comedic element. It shows like it's actual like extending the story as opposed to this random sing along that didn't really do that. It was just them singing a song.
I mean, I would argue. I mean, I feel like like I said, I feel like it kind of let them know where they stood with each other, and like they kind of had this shared common bond of like showmanship and song and all that shit. And then it kind of sets the stage of like, okay, well, who's going to turn on who when? And I mean, it all played out how it did, but I feel like it gave both guys kind of, and Chris Jericho's always the type to reinvent himself. I feel like that's one of the things he'd never done in his career. Well, I mean, obviously, besides, performing with Fozzy, but, it gave him something new to do. It gave MJF a way for himself to stand out and to, kind of dust his chops and let Tony know what he was signing on and what he could hope to invest in the future. So, I liked it. I liked it.
I feel like this is going to be a common trend through most of my stuff. You guys are going to love it all. And
well, we'll see.
Let's hear your guys' 2020 moments. Let's go. Let's keep with the eras. Let's do your guys' 2020 moments.
So my list is literally just the top 5 moments. So I'll go last. So if Brandon went year by year,
date stamp stuff.
Nope.
Okay, then Brandon, how about you and I go back and forth then?
Sure. As far as 2020, I mean, I guess you would kind of encapsulate 2019 and 2020, right?
Basically,
as being kind of a year one bundle. I guess mine, as far as like stuff that I remember the most from that time period, stuff that I really enjoyed the most. I had been earlier on a pretty big Kenny Omega mark, so see him come to America and as part of effectively like his own company, right? Like the Elite was really something he spearheaded in New Japan to kind of set himself and his boys apart from the Bullet Club. And then here he comes in 2019, along with Cody and Hangman and the others, right? The Bucks, less we say about them, the better. But, come start a new company. And then, Kenny doesn't win the belt right away. You have guys like Jericho, guys like Mox coming over and establishing themselves and their brands in AEW and getting the company over. And then here comes Kenny Omega around the end of 2020, winning for the first time the AEW World Championship, and then skipping town with Don Callis, new MLW announcer, and they, I believe, were the ones to kind of set off the Impact invasion, the AEW Impact partnership at the time, which I thought was really cool that, you have the two alternatives kind of working in this tandem, and hopefully we can cover that in a podcast at some point, because I would like to do the comparison between that partnership and the current one between TNA and NXT/WWE and kind of see where TNA fell in that whole mix. But as far as that goes, that was definitely my favorite, seeing Kenny come to the States, win a big one. On the opposite end of things, I thought the Brody Lee celebration of life was really touching. I felt like for as little time as he was within the company, but as much impact and as much, his character and his person contributed to the company. I thought it was a really touching tribute to have everybody. Well, I have a lot of people who were close to him in the show, and to at the end of everything have -1, his son, be gifted Brody Lee's TNT championship and basically, be guaranteed financial restitution from Tony Khan in effect for pretty much like the rest of his life, I would think, or for however long Tony plans to stay in the wrestling business. And then them bringing out guys like, Eric Redbeard or whatever he happened to go by, Eric Rowan now, obviously, but to bring him out and to have him as part of that tribute as well, I thought was a really nice touch. I thought that was a really classy move by Tony. And hopefully he doesn't have to do another one of those for a very long time. But I feel like for what had happened and the suddenness of it, I feel like they did really well with it.
Did you have any of those on your bingo card, Pierce?
So, like I said, I have it as a top 5. Kenny winning the AEW title is number 3 on my list.
Okay. Figure you may as well check those off as we get to them. So feel free to add in extra points on that.
Now that I think of it, my number 5 did happen in 2020, I believe, because of an NXT no compete clause that they forgot to take off when he joined the main roster. Malachi Black's debut. No one expected it that early because WWE fucked up his contract, and after 30 days he shows up, kicks Cody's head off, and is off to the races.
Yep. Clearly no contract tampering in there at all, right?
No, it was complete. They fucking WWE fucked up his contract. He was supposed to have the WWE.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is Swerve came out a couple days ago and in an interview said that he was never directly contacted by WWE. They went to his agent. And that was in direct contrast to Tony Khan continually accusing WWE of contract tampering. So I was just making a little snide remark on that.
Oh, well, okay.
Because Keith Lee and Jeff Hardy and all them, they had all their merch and music and intro stuff ready to go within 24 hours of their non-compete completing with no tampering whatsoever, right, guys?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. It's business,
But we got in 2021, 2 real quick points here. The Cody and a go-go weigh-in. I mean, there isn't really much that needs to be said there. A go-go hated that segment.
You're not going to get, oh, that was great for me. That was really bad.
It was just having a weigh-in segment where just nothing happens afterwards. It's like, what are we doing here? Why does this have to be? Why is this on TV? And then Blood and Guts, where it was Pinnacle versus Inner Circle, and Inner Circle forfeit just to not see Jericho get thrown off of the cell that they had set up there. And then MJF threw him off anyway into a giant pile of unpainted cardboard that looked, even though they said it was the diamond plate of the staging, it was very clearly cardboard. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for, safe falls and all that. I'm not saying he should have fallen on a ramp, but I am saying that, at least paint both sides of the cardboard when you're going to do a spot like that. It looked really stupid.
There's a little thing in the business called suspension of disbelief. I feel like that would apply there. But
no, I mean,
and then
you
I'm pretty sure there's padding under that too.
Yeah, there was padding under it, but literally, you can see all the stills of Jericho when he fell in. It was literally just they had the diamond plate top, so one side of the cardboard was painted to look like the metal stage, like the Dynamite Diamond Plate, I think they called it or whatever at the time. And then the other side was just plain up cardboard, like unpainted brown cardboard. And it just looked very poorly produced. Not their only segment, and it wasn't a Dynamite, but the Exploding Barbed Wire Death Match was also in 2021. And we know how shit that was. So
talk about a year of contrast.
Production value needed a lot of work back then.
Yeah, they were still pretty much in their infancy yet, and I mean, I don't know how much you could have done with a match like that. I mean, I guess they had Nick Gage involved in the match too, right? Which I'm trying to think, was Gage's match on pay-per-view or was it on TV?
No, it was on Dynamite.
Jericho.
And they had that. It was on the pizza cutter spot, and then it went immediately to a Domino's pizza commercial right after.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I didn't even have that on here.
Oh, I should have. Oh, damn it.
Yeah, see, you're giving me a list of 20 now.
Yeah, I should have had that on there on mine for my 2021. But I guess I don't know. Were you done with yours, Don?
Yeah.
Did you still have some more to shit on?
I'm just trying to cruise through them.
Oh, sure, yeah. So kind of following Kenny Omega into 2021, his match with Bryan Danielson on the September 22nd edition of Dynamite Grand Slam was fucking everything that you'd want it to be. I mean, it's a shame that it was the 30-minute match where you would think that they were going to build to a sequel, and then said sequel has yet to happen. And now we're entering Bryan Danielson's final run as a full-time competitor in ring. And who the hell knows where Kenny Omega is with all of this shit, because they need to run that back. That ended in a 30-minute draw. It got 1 million views on YouTube in less than 24 hours. And I believe it was Danielson's, was it his first match? It was certainly his first dream match back coming into AEW. Was it? Yeah, that really says a fucking lot.
I want to fight Kenny Omega. No titles. I want to fight him. And then they just did it.
Yeah, they duked it to a draw, and the crowd was hot for it. People wanted that match so bad. And God, like, that's another thing too. Like, if they never get a chance to run that back and they leave that sitting out the way, you know, like Danielson and McGuinness had kind of their big what if being in AEW up until this point, then, but if they never get to run that back, that'd be a damn travesty. That would be a tragedy. Great match.
And that was their first of 260 time limit draws, right?
I mean, hey, you know, in this case, I will say the time limit draw can be very, very effective in use of a story. And especially in the case of Danielson, where he's just coming in, you don't want to make him look weak, right? You don't want to put him on an L right away. And Kenny, I believe at the time, couldn't really afford a loss in his own right. But obviously both are ultra competitive, ultra talented, world renowned, right? So in this case, I'll say one of 260 some odd time limit draws or what have you. This one is one where you could easily justify it.
I think that was the first one, if I'm not mistaken, and it was actually done quite well. They just have overused the shit out of it since then.
They had two draws that I can think of in 2021, and both of them were done incredibly well.
What was the other one?
Danielson versus Hangman. They went an hour.
That one also ended in a time limit draw?
Their first match, and then they had a second match that Hangman won clean.
Yep. And that would have been the Owen Hart finale, right?
Nope, that's...
that wasn't?
2020.
Oh, no, that was Danielson winning that.
Won the title eliminator tournament. Then Winter's Coming, they had the draw. And then like 2 weeks later on the New Year's edition of Dynamite, they went like 35 minutes and Hangman beat him.
Nice. Last thing I think I really liked about 2021, and it's something that I watched back a few times ever since it came out, and obviously Punk coming back on Rampage was, you know, the talk of AEW at that time, of pro wrestling at the time. But the thing that really kind of stuck with me came after, where you had Eddie Kingston come out, and he's one of many guys to come out in AEW and just shit on Punk and be like, nobody wants you here. They never wanted you here. Everyone's afraid to say it, not me, quoting from Eddie Kingston. And just Kingston, that was the first like real I've heard a lot about it at Kingston prior to that, but just to kind of see him go toe to toe with Punk on the mic like that, and just not necessarily like put him in his place, but really like kind of speak for a lot of people in the locker room who just were like really, really, for lack of a better term, I put it colloquially, skeptical of him being there. And I thought Eddie could have came away with something later on in that feud. I feel like it kind of Punk calling him a bum was pretty on point too, because that really stuck with him. I don't know that Eddie's ever ascended to that level ever since he had that one-off match with Punk. I feel like they could have done a bigger program together, but I guess it just really wasn't in the cards. But that was definitely just the intensity, and just you can feel like almost like a deep personal vitriol coming from that promo. So that was another one of my favorite things that came out of 2021 in AEW.
They had 8 days before the pay-per-view to sell that program, and they fucking nailed it with one program.
Eddie really showed why he belonged on a big stage in that promo. Oh my fucking God. If people talk about it before too, but I didn't really get it. But yeah, Eddie is a personification of passion in pro wrestling. He is so passionate about the product. He's so passionate about the sport in general. And he does what he needs to do in order to earn his keep. So he's always humble about it, but he's always hungry, which is really, really cool to see.
Pierce, did you get anything in 2021, or did Brandon touch any of yours?
No, but my number 2 moment of all time from Dynamite, I'm surprised it's not on Brandon's list, but Cody Rhodes is in the ring. Arn Anderson comes out. He tells him, he's like, if somebody comes and say, get out of the car. You just give him the car. If they do that to me, I pull out the Glock and I spill his brains on the concrete. It's the fucking greatest fucking thing I've ever seen. It's so good.
It's such an Arn Anderson promo. He just has a way with like looking like your dad, and then just like out of nowhere, you think he's just kind of a man of few words, and then he spouts off some grim, dark shit like that. Just really brass tacks kind of guy. It was great.
Moving on to 2022. My cringe moment was in November. I think it was the first Dynamite in November, when Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal had ambushed Darby Allin, and they were joined by a fake Sting. And everyone was kind of like, oh, who's the fake Sting? It must be a big debut. Get really excited, only for him to unmask. And it was Two Dimes, Cole Carter, who nobody gave a shit about, and nobody has still given a shit about him since.
I don't even know who that is.
He was originally on NXT.
He was one of the family. He was with the Don on NXT. He was with Tony D for a bit.
It was Two Dimes. And then he got let go for I think a negative test, if I recall correctly. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's what it was. It didn't seem like it was like a bad behavior thing or anything. But anyways, he debuted on Dynamite as fake Sting, aka Cole Carter, and like I said, nobody gave a shit at all. It was like a who the fuck is that guy moment, if one ever existed.
Like such a literally who name too. Cole Carter. Just yeah.
You know, it's funny though.
It's very unfortunate.
That's not the first debut that really fell on deaf ears. I remember when, it's funny how this one ended up turning out, but when Christian Cage debuted in AEW, fans were pissed because they were hyping it as like this big deal, and the lights go out, and it's Christian Cage, and
it's ECW all over again. It's Christian.
And like nobody was in for that either. And now, funny enough, he's probably the most consistent heel in the entire company for his work.
Career revival.
Yeah, all the dead fathers he can thank for that. But yeah, they've had a few debuts that kind of fell flat just because of overhype. Tony Khan's weekly announcements that were comical. I remember one, he had a big announcement, and basically it was all in tickets were going to be going on sale in like 3 weeks. That was his big announcement. And it's like, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
But that was mine for 2022. Not a whole lot there, but that one was pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I'm still pissed that I missed this because it happened in Milwaukee, but from New Japan, Kazuchika Okada made his first appearance in AEW when he was coming out. Who was he coming out to fight? I think it was Jay White, actually. I think it was Jay White, and was Hangman in the ring too? I know for sure Jay White was there
White
because
and Adam Cole were fighting Hangman.
that's right. Yes. Yep. I knew there was one other piece of that puzzle missing, but here comes Kazuchika Okada for his first appearance ever. Also got over 1 million views in a short amount of time on YouTube when that first happened. Again, in Milwaukee. So my dumb ass thinking nothing's going to happen on these shows that they tape during the week. And there's, just flood of New Japan guys suddenly coming out. I don't think that's where Osprey and the United Kingdom jumped in either, but I think that might have been a week or two prior or after. But in any case, you only get, there's no such thing, or I should say, there's nothing like the first time, and I missed Okada the first time, and I was very sad about that. Although I was very happy to see him live when we went, Pierce. That was a great time.
It was an awesome time.
And I'll be talking about that in a little bit too, because I got that on my list here somewhere.
Oh yeah, my number
Spoiler alert
moment from that show. Spoilers, but which might be recency bias, but I don't care.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, last thing that I think was great out of 2022 was the infamous MJF work shoot, however you want to call it, where the bidding war of 2024 was starting to become a subject, and he gets on the mic and talks about how he's being treated relative to all these guys getting bussed in from the Fed, from the E, and he's talking about, hey boss, would you treat me better if I was a WWE guy or an ex-WWE guy? And then basically just like, I'm not waiting until 2024. I want you to fire me. And then he starts getting unhinged, going off on the cameraman, talking about, don't tell me down, you piece of shit. Yeah, you shut your mouth.
Call him a fucking mark.
Gets right in the fucking camera, dives into the camera down at ringside and says, I want you to fire me. You fucking mark.
Yeah.
And then just goes off and the mic gets cut and you think, oh my God, he actually said that.
Well, that was that was right on the tails of his apparent disappearing act during Double or Nothing weekend, and he flew off in a plane by himself because he was mad about having a job to Wardlow. And
oh yeah, God forbid we
Sean Ross Sapp reported a whole bunch of stuff that we don't know if it was actually true or untrue still to this day, but there was a lot of flack associated with that moment, I remember. But the promo itself was great. There was a lot of bullshit, though, and a lot of stories going around then that we still don't really know what was true and what wasn't.
Which, I mean, I guess is a lot of the magic of MJF, right? It's a lot of what he brings to the table. Is there's like it's like, and it's kind of the theme of the last couple episodes we've done on the show, right? Like, where does the character end and the real person begin? And that's where I feel like MJF really has done a great job representing AEW and representing himself and really pro wrestling as a whole, just being able to really blur that line between character work and shit that he's actually thinking,
Pierce, you got anything for 2022 left over? Or
yeah,
can I?
This is my number one Dynamite moment, and I would say it's a bit of an outlier. It is MJF. It's the promo where he just told his story. We always saw MJF come out, talk shit about the crowds, talk shit about who he was talking about, but this time it was Max. He was subdued. I think it's genuinely the greatest promo that's ever been put on AEW TV, and it's a part of the best story that AEW ever produced. Yeah, you guys might remember it as the Roll of Quarters promo, and the kid, he finally thought he was going to make friends. Kids threw quarters at him and said, "Pick him up, Jew boy, pick him up." And it was about CM Punk leaving and him just being mad about it and saying, you know what? I'm going to become somebody in spite of him. And in spite of what happened to me, and the real cherry on top was CM Punk coming out, and he could have, they could have had him cut a promo, but instead just quietly asking Max, "Is that real? Is that true?" Max is crying. He says yes, and he leaves the ring. I think it's MJF's magnum opus right now.
I would agree to that. I mean, and especially too, like when you can suspend a guy like CM Punk's disbelief on that matter as well. If that was a genuine reaction from Punk, then bravo for MJF. And to get that kind of praise effectively from your childhood hero on top, like there's really, and I said it about MJF too, like how much more can the guy really feasibly achieve in AEW? I mean, in 5 years or so, he's done pretty much everything that you could want to do. He worked with his childhood hero. He's longest reigning champ in the promotion, won damn near every belt of relevance. I mean, at least in the singles sense, right? But I mean, he's not even 30 yet, and he's done almost it all. And he's still got so much more. It's crazy. I feel like he's still got so much more to contribute to pro wrestling as a whole, too. So it'll be interesting to see how the next few years of AEW fare for him, because he did sign for some fat money. So it'll be curious to see what all lies in store for him as the years go on, as we approach, I assume, 10 years of Dynamite. And I assume MJF will probably still be around. But
we didn't actually plan this segment outside of good and bad moments, but your guys' moments actually transitioned to my worst moment of 2023. So I'm just going to go right into that. Talking about MJF and the quarters promo. And while I'm very well aware that this was a thing already for Juice Robinson, the timing of Juice coming out to the ring with MJF in the ring with a roll of quarters with the name Friedman on it was not well thought out at all. This was right at the beginning of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian people, and there's a lot of tension associated with that, and just a complete tone deaf lack of awareness from whoever vetted that to be okay. And they got thrown through the ringer for that one. Yeah, that was just not a cringe moment, just a brainless moment on their part. And hopefully something they learn from and don't do that again.
yeah, the timing was not right.
No. The only thing that came remotely close to that, because like admittedly AEW's had very few like stupid moments like that. The only other one where and I think this was more unintentional than anything, was they had a match. I can't remember what the exact match was, but it was Adam Cole had a crown of thorns put on his head on a Good Friday Rampage episode. That was really fucking bad too. But that was a bit more of a passing thing, whereas this was quite egregious. And it's Juice Robinson is a great character, I think, in AEW, and I don't say that a lot about characters in AEW because I don't believe there's a lot of great characters in AEW, but Juice has a lot of charisma that doesn't really exist in most areas of the business. And that was his gimmick throughout his basically his whole character, to have, what is it, the hand of God, where he has a roll of quarters in his hand and punches somebody, but not the right time, not the right person, not the right execution at all. So that was my 2023 moment.
To contrast, I mean, and right, 2023, like I said, was just kind of a year, right? I've watched like highlight videos of the year, some like 4 hours long somehow, and it's a slog. The one highlight I will take away from it that I feel is a standout moment, is a diamond in the rough, as you will, for AEW, was when Edge and Christian had finally reunited. Oh, sorry, Adam Copeland and Christian Cage had finally reunited since what, the 2020 Royal Rumble, I think it was the last time they were in the ring together.
Yep.
I think it's 2021.
And was it the 21 Rumble?
No, it was 20.
Yeah.
Were they still in the Thunder?
No, it was 20 because it was right before the pandemic.
No, it was 2021 because it was in the Thunderdome.
Oh, that's right. That's
Oh,
right.
it would have been.
Edge's return was 2020, and then the moment with Christian was in 2021. You're right.
Yes. So it's been a couple of years since they've both been in the ring together, and this is the first time they've been in front of a live audience together in years and years. So, Adam's like, I want to come back because for one big reason, he wants to win world titles. He wants to do all that stuff, put over the young guys, have the dream matches, but he really wants, to his daughter's behest, to go have fun with Uncle Jay, with Christian, right? So Christian hears Adam's case. They start to hug it out. You think you're going to get one monumental tag run with the boys again. And then over his shoulder, as they're hugging, Christian puts the mic to his lips and goes, "Go fuck yourself." And everyone's just losing their mind because I can't remember the last time an F-bomb was dropped. Well, minus the thing that I talked about earlier with MJF. But we'll say it's the second drop.
You just went full robot. You just went full robot there. We missed all of that.
Me?
Yes, you.
Yeah, you.
Uh-oh. Is it happening?
You're okay now, but that last 10
God,
seconds.
the cyborgs are taking off. It's Skynet, boys.
You went full robot.
Did you hear the part where I said "go fuck yourself"?
We did hear the "go fuck yourself."
Oh, no.
Excellent. That came through loud and clear.
Which
you didn't hear it? Oh no.
Donny, you said you are from the same hometown, so could you give us your best Christian Cage impression real quick?
Oh, he's got impressions.
Go fuck yourself. No.
I'll take it.
It's not that great. It's a hard voice to imitate.
It's 4.5 stars. I would have rated it higher if it were in the Tokyo Dome, but
two very nice Canadian men saying "go fuck yourself." So
yep.
6.5 for me.
Hell yeah. That was a good segment. That was a good segment. I remember watching that one back. And another F-bomb I remember was Rick Ross calling Keith Lee a big motherfucker.
Oh, how can I forget that, man? Man, that's unfortunate.
And definitely some.
I feel like I would have definitely had a bigger list with this one, but yeah, no, you brought that up. I'm like, yeah, that was funny as hell.
And then after that, Danielson did them every 3 weeks. I'm gonna kick your fucking head in.
Yep. Do you have any 2023 moments?
I don't. My last one is 2024.
All right. Well, 2024. This one actually was only 2 weeks ago when this one happened. This is with OC Orange Cassidy dumping a truck full of pennies, and when I say a truck full, I mean like half a scoop full of pennies into Jericho's Bentley. I guess it was trying to be kind of like the Stone Cold Vince segment with the cement getting poured into Vince's Corvette, but this was way worse.
I know what you're talking about.
Not nearly enough pennies, and Jericho standing outside screaming, "My Bentley! My Bentley!" like half a dozen times. It was pretty cringe.
That was a very good Chris Jericho impression, though, I might add. You've got a thing for impersonating these Canadian wrestlers there, Don.
Thanks. Maybe I should figure out a stand-up routine in the coming years. Ope-Eh Live.
Be the next Sami Zayn. Hey. I want my tickets. I better get discounts on that shit.
Yeah, you'll be one of the opening acts. We'll get you to do a monologue on Austin Theory.
Oh, I just wanted to be like a chair or something, I'll just be like a set piece, and then I'll just randomly spout one-liners throughout, as they're fitting or not, but that's another podcast for another time.
Okay, and friends. What do you guys got for 2024?
I think we got the same moment because we saw it live.
I mean, right. Recency bias factored in, sure.
Is it recency bias? Yes.
How can you?
Still
Yes.
amazing? Yes.
As I said before, how can you deny the fact that this was easily it was one of the defining moments for character in Hangman Page's entire career. It was, like I said last week, I feel like it was his Austin 316 moment. I feel like it was what really gets him into his firm character mold and allows him to thrive and to stay in the main event scene for the foreseeable future. I can't see him being, a curtain jerker again after that, and especially after the fallout from it, what happened at All Out. I mean, yeah, Hangman burning down Swerve's house, I feel like was the moment of 2024 for Dynamite so far. And Pierce, you and I were lucky enough to bear witness in person. We were able to lend to the awesome "that was arson" chants that made TV and that got comments on the tube ski. So yeah, we were definitely a part of history there, man.
It's the best moment of 2024. I mean, I only have it number 4 on my top 5. So if I were to quick rundown, number 5 is Malachi Black's debut. Number 4 is Hangman burning down the house. Number 3 is Kenny Omega winning the AEW title. Number 2 is Arn pulling out the Glock, and number 1 is MJF telling his story. So I think I have a kind of unique list for a top 5. I'm in my own mark though, but yeah, Hangman, after everything that Swerve did and still thinking he was the good guy, the alcoholism pushed him to the darkest place of his mind that he's ever been. And I mean, it's just the most shocking moment probably ever on Dynamite, realistically, from a storyline standpoint. And I don't think they could top it eventually, but I don't know if they will.
Only one way to find out.
If they're shifting more towards digital, right? I mean, it's kind of like with WWE and Netflix. Like, it's not going to be like Punk says. It's not going to be like full frontal and F-bombs every now and again, but you're definitely going to have a lot more liberty as far as the content you can put out. And I feel like the same could potentially be true with AEW as well. So hopefully we can see some laxness on, what it is that they are not allowed to say and do. So, like you said, Don, there's only one way to find out.
Yep.
Steal me a Max password. Just thinking about, was it $50 a month or whatever it is now? Ugh.
Is that how expensive Max is?
I'm exaggerating only slightly. No, I'm exaggerating only slightly, but I mean, it was expensive when I canceled it, and it's only gone up in price since, and I'm sure it'll continue once AEW comes on. So not solely by virtue of AEW, but I'm sure the new year will bring in new streaming options, which will, of course, drive up the value of the product. And, that's capitalism for you, though. So what can you do?
One thing of note through all of this is one bit of discourse that can finally end in 2025, I hope, is the whole ratings discussions between shows.
Mm-hmm. God, I'm so sick of ratings discussion.
Raw will be completely on Netflix, so there's no ratings there. NXT will still be on CW in the States, but everywhere else it'll be on Netflix. SmackDown also on Netflix everywhere else but the States, and then AEW will be simulcasting. So I do expect to see tweets saying, "Oh, look at AEW, 200,000 viewers," not, withstanding of most of them probably being on Max afterwards if there's some added value. I am curious to see what the price of the pay-per-views end up being. If it's only discounted by the cost of Max, I mean, it's not really a discount if you're spending money on Max to watch the pay-per-views. So I would hope the discount's going to be more than that, but we'll see.
So if you're really only getting Max for AEW, like you're kind of, look at all the stuff you get with Max. not to dick ride Max too much, but Max is a pretty great streaming platform. I think they have a lot of really good shows and movies on it, and I don't really care to be away from it. But it's just right; it's a price thing at this point. And then you juggle with everything else. But
Well, in
I
fairness,
mean,
I'm a guy who doesn't pay for TV. Like the Netflix account that we have at our house, I don't pay for it. Marta pays for it. I don't watch it. I don't go out. The only time I'm watching Netflix is when I'm watching something with her. I don't watch Netflix on my own, right? That is the same thing with me with every streaming service. It's up to me. The only streaming service I would have would be the ones that play the sports that I watch because I don't really watch TV. So I would actually be getting Max only for AEW if I choose to do so. I'll have to figure out what the Canadian rights are to that, but I am in a case where that is the case. So those people do exist.
fair enough.
We're already pretty deep into the show, so we got to breeze through Bad Blood coming up this Saturday out of Atlanta. Start time at 6 Eastern, so a little bit earlier, just due to them going on having UFC on the same date. So they want to have WWE done before UFC starts. 5 matches on the card. I'll run them down real quick. We've got Liv Morgan versus Rhea Ripley for Women's World Championship with Dominic Mysterio suspended above the ring in a shark cage.
So close, Pierce.
Who do you think is going to win this one, boys?
So because Dom's going to be in the shark cage, it's going to be like the end of every single shark cage match. Oh, no, he slipped something through the cracks. Bam. Brass knuckles to the head. 1, 2, 3. Liv retains.
Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, with the added variable of Dom in the shark cage, and with the fact that, I mean, Rhea doesn't necessarily need the women's championship to be a draw to be big, at least not at this point. I feel like there's chance of shenanigans play factor and that Liv Morgan retains. There's also some weird rumor about Raquel Rodriguez possibly being a factor in this too, like kind of as a counter, as a foil for Rhea Ripley and this other big gal who's aligned with her former tag partner, Liv Morgan. Don't know how they're going to dig that alliance back up and give it some new coat, but I mean, that's out there too. So we'll see. But I think Liv needs the title a lot more than Rhea does at this juncture.
Yeah,
that I will say.
I would agree with that. I think to the point of Raquel, if she comes back, she's a much better heel than she is a face. Smiley, happy Raquel doesn't really translate very well to TV. I don't think she has
only character as a babyface is that she has a back.
Yeah, it's not particularly great. I think her NXT work as a heel was much more believable. I think what it also can do, I fully expect this feud to go all the way through to War Games, where this is the women's War Games match. Liv and team, probably Pure Fusion Collective.
Got to give them something to do.
Goes up against Rhea and team, whoever that team ends up being. So it gives
Cortana Chance or whatever. You know, they'd be 2 of them and then 1 other person.
Yeah, so I could probably Lyra, Valkyria. Maybe you get Natalia in there. I don't know, because they had Natalia out there for some stuff. I don't know. It's that side is a little bit more wishy-washy. I think the 5 heel women seem to be pretty set with Pure Fusion returning Raquel, if that's what makes sense, and Liv being the 5 heels. You're right. I do think Liv still needs the title a bit more. It'll probably also give Liv a challenger for Crown Jewel that isn't Rhea. I would assume that might end up being Lyra, but we'll see. I expect Liv to win as well. Next match, another grudge match. Damian Priest versus Finn Balor.
I think it's going to be Damian. I think Finn really needs the win, but I think they're going to put Damian over. I just got a feeling.
Why do you think Finn needs the win? Sorry, before you chime in there, Brandon, why do you think Finn needs the win?
Because he never fucking wins singles matches.
I would argue that Damian Priest doesn't win either without people's help. I said that his whole title reign.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but I mean, it's just Damian is so over right now. Like, he is more over now than when he had the title, I would say. I feel like he could take a dusty finish lost. I don't want too many dusty finishes on this card.
I think they're going to be loaded with dusty finishes in this.
I think this is the pay-per-view for dusty finishes.
There's a lot of fuckery that's going to happen in this pay-per-view, I think, but sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yeah.
But I think realistically, Finn was being nicknamed Pin Balor this year. I think Damian wins it, but I would really like Finn to win it. And that's just, I want to see Finn get a true singles push like he did at the beginning of his main roster career, and I want to see essentially, him to get better and better and eventually bring back the Demon and have him fucking win as the Demon.
Brandon?
Well, I mean, if that would be the case, I feel like it would almost be better for Finn to lose here. No, I mean, Finn kind of set himself up, right? Like, I feel like if Finn wins here, well, let me think about this now. Honestly, moving past, like, when we factor in, like, the women's championship match, right? I said before that Liv could use the women's world title more than Rhea, and maybe Rhea going without the women's world title means her and Damian chase the tag titles against Finn and JD. I mean, there's already been enough physical altercation, right, between Rhea and JD that you could feasibly, in, say, like a tag title match, if you really wanted to keep this feud going, have Damian and Rhea have Rhea become the first ever woman to hold a tag title in, at least I think she was. I don't, because Chyna was, I believe, co-intercontinental champion with Jericho. I don't think she ever won a tag title.
No,
but I like that could be one thing. But I feel like as long as Finn has like the world tag team titles, there's kind of a prize at the end of the rope for Damian and probably by extension Rhea to go after. And since, Jay's their affiliate and, he's already the Intercontinental Champion and maybe for a little bit yet, then and since you have the Terror Twins established already, fuck it. Like after Bad Blood, whatever happens in it, maybe that involves Damian winning and then Finn's out for revenge and he's bitter. Maybe that involves Finn winning through shenanigans, obviously, because it's the new Judgment Day, right? Or even the old Judgment Day. That was their game was, gangland tactics and shit. But in this case, whatever happens, have them chase after the world tag titles after and extend this feud out. But in this case, I mean, right, Finn's taking a lot of pins. I could see in this one, Finn possibly winning it through shenanigans, similarly to how Liv would ideally be winning her match, just to kind of keep the momentum of the Judgment Day going forward.
I think if Damian Priest loses this match, he's a sitting duck. If you're really trying to build Damian as a standalone character, he does, as much as he might have the pops now, I think a lot of that is still due to being alongside Rhea. I think if you need him to be a singles guy that stands on his own, he has to beat Finn Balor. So I'm picking Damian Priest. Next up, I'm going to move this one because we don't know which one's going to be the main event. I'm just reading off Wikipedia here. For the WWE Women's Championship, Nia Jax defends against Bayley.
Nia.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that Nia's going to beat Bayley. She did have an interesting segment on SmackDown last week where she threatened Tiffany Stratton, and Tiffany did not look very impressed with that. So, do we see a cash in here?
No.
Not yet. They'll tease another one for sure. Yeah, they will tease it for sure. But yeah, the iron's not hot enough for them to strike on that just yet.
So what comes next for Nia? Should she beat Bayley and there's no cash in by Tiffany? Do we finally get Charlotte?
I mean, if Could be Naomi. I apologize, Brandon. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I mean, right, like there are options. I would prefer I heard you mention Naomi, I would prefer she had something of kind of an alliance. I've always wondered like why it is that they've never bothered to include Nia Jax and Naomi in like bloodline related stuff, right? Because they're affiliated and they don't have any women in the bloodline yet, but they're very much family. They're very much bloodline themselves. So like maybe like a nod or like a tongue in cheek alliance between Nia and Naomi, because Naomi can actually get things done where Tiffany can't, and maybe, or, in a way they're making Tiffany kind of feel inferior, which leads to her cash in or what have you somewhere down the line. But I mean, you have Crown Jewel that's going to be coming up in November, right? And if Charlotte's good to go, the Queen versus the Queen at Crown Jewel makes the most sense to me. And Charlotte Flair, being arguably the largest female draw in the company, would make perfect sense if they're going to be taking Nia and the women's championship out to Saudi Arabia and she needs to defend against someone. So,
yeah, agree. I think we're all on Nia to beat Bayley. Bayley's not going to win the match.
no.
No, it's not.
It would be going backwards in a story.
Yeah, it's the easiest match to call, I think, by far. For this, it's actually a bit of a tricky card. Like, I mean, we were pretty definitive on Liv winning, but could still very easily be Rhea if they want to give it back to her. Damian and Finn, I mean, we think that Damian's going to win, but I think this one's, they're not as easy to call as sometimes that they've been already. And we're probably going to see that in the next two matches as well. CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, Hell in a Cell. This may or may not be the main event.
It's the people's main event.
Yeah, I agree to that.
I think CM Punk's going to win. I think this is going to be the most violent of the three matches. I think it's going to, I think it's going to harken back to, ROH Punk when he got super bloody in his matches. I think maybe you see something similar to Punk's Monster promo. We kind of had it on Raw, and when we were talking about it, I kind of wish he would have brought it up, because he was kind of going that way, where he needs to become the monster to fight the monsters of this world. I think it's going to be, he's not coming out to Mizera Cantaray like people want. It's not going to fucking happen. But maybe, because he has to turn it back, maybe we see him come out to This Fire Burns. I think that'd be a cool callback.
Can't have them talking about being a monster, because we already had that match on Raw between Braun and Bronson. So.
Oh no, we're talking about a different kind of monster. He had to become a monster to fight Raven, and
it is monster season, boys.
It is.
Yeah.
Shout out
to
Raven.
I mean, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I'm on board with what you're saying, Pierce. Like, because in addition to the Raven feud, he did cast that same kind of spell in his feud with MJF as well. And, both of those feuds were very deeply personally rooted. So, I mean, this is definitely the feud. And I mean, he's not going to, and he didn't get the words out, unfortunately. Maybe he gets them out in a promo before, if we can hope, right? But I mean, this is very much in the same vein and the same spirit of those two prior feuds. I personally am thinking and hoping that Drew wins. I mean, realistically, Punk likely will win, right? Because Punk could use the momentum going forward, and I mean,
I think Punk's winning because Survivor Series is going to be Punk Gunther.
Oh, you think it's going to be Punk Gunther?
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever see Punk on a Saudi Arabia show. He could, but it would be very, contradiction to the, like a blood covered, what. But it's very much, I think, Punk Gunther is the way to go for their next big money match on a pay-per-view. Obviously, Survivor Series is going to be more about War Games, but they're going to have one big title match on it, and what's bigger than Punk versus Gunther?
Yeah, because it's not going to be Cody. So.
it will have been a year since Punk came back. Also, his WWE return was at Survivor Series last year. So there's also, I guess, some story to be told with that as well. Yeah, and if there was anybody who would be more fitting to challenge Gunther, probably would be the winner of that match. And we're not getting Drew again in that position, at least not with both Gunther and Drew as the way they are right now. So my heart really wants it to be Drew, though. I'm still holding out hope because it's like, it's Punk, right? Like, and it's, I was a big Punk mark. I still to some extent am, but like, let's face it, facts. Like, Punk is like, when you try and sell things realistically, like, right, the sell is the great equalizer in and of itself, right? But still, Punk is like, he's 45 years old. He's got one human foot left. I'm sure was pretty banged up from the last couple matches that he had. Like, I don't know. I couldn't feasibly see Punk in real life beating Drew McIntyre in that environment. But I mean, this is pro wrestling we are talking about. So, and in order to put Punk forward as a solid contender going forward, because they still not just Survivor Series, right? But they also got the Rumble that's going to be coming up. And you know they're going to be pushing him as a very credible contender for a WrestleMania championship match, because that is still his stated dream and one of his big reasons for coming back to WWE to begin with. So you got to keep him relevant. You got to keep him strong leading up to that, which I get. But it's still just going to suck seeing Drew lose, man. I don't know. I want Drew, but realistically, Punk.
I think I'm in a similar boat, but I think it's got to be Punk. Drew winning doesn't really help enough for continued storylines out of this. I think you transition Punk to Gunther after this, so Punk makes the most sense. And the last match, a tag team match between Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu against Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns.
So I thought the finish of this was going to be pretty clear and dry until a couple of hours ago. I also didn't think this match was going to main event until a couple of hours ago. Cody Rhodes was on the McAfee show today, and then after the fact, somebody was taking a video, and Pat said to Cody, he's like, "Hey, her big boss is coming back this weekend." Cody is like, "He is? Which one?" He's like, "Oh, I've said too much." So I think we see a little Dwayne appearance to help Fatu and Solo win, and I think that's where you get the War Games match. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think the final boss is going to be coming back, and I think he's going to play a factor into the finish.
And that would lend more credence to why it was actually going to be the main event versus Punk McIntyre.
I get it's Roman's return match, but it really didn't. It doesn't need a main event. But if there's going to be this many shenanigans, which it's Bloodline, it's shenanigans.
Absolutely.
It can main event.
And I mean, right. And for the fact too, like, even with just the variables we thought were going to be in place at face value, the match like still could, argue with the build that's happened over this whole year, right? With Punk and McIntyre, with both guys being huge draws in their own right. But then if you, like you're saying, which makes perfect sense, like factoring in the potential of The Rock being involved, and then like, what's he going to do? I mean, obviously he's pro Bloodline. He's for family regardless. And there's only one guy in that match who's not family. There's only one guy in that match with a championship that Rock wants, and that's Cody. So then it'll be interesting too. Well, where's Roman going to stand in all of this? He's partnered with Cody against his bloodline, or not his bloodline, but technically in bloodline, but not his stable, So there'll be a lot of questions that are going to need answering come War Games time, because that is looking to be a bloodline v bloodline match, and that's going to be fucking fire no matter how it's configured. But
did you guys see the clip on Pat McAfee's Twitter today?
Yeah, that's what I was just talking about.
Oh, sorry, I missed it. I must have. I was had my headset off for a second, so you were talking about that. Okay, so
you were watching Dynamite because they're starting with Ricochet and Osprey, and they repeated
not
that
what I
spot
was
again.
doing. That is never what I will.
they did the
Never, I will
They
never
did that spot.
prioritize Dynamite over this podcast
damn it.
ever. Unlike some people.
Of course they did the fucking spot. Why wouldn't they do the fucking spot?
But
Anyway.
okay, so sorry. So I missed that part. But nevertheless, I think I'm still not 100% sure we're going to get Bloodline versus Bloodline for War Games, especially with Jay winning the Intercontinental title now. It could be. I think you're going to have Jimmy come back, so that gives you 3. If you have Jay, that's
he did
4.
come back last weekend. I don't know if you guys saw that. He made his return on a house show.
Jimmy
so
did?
He's medically cleared.
Yeah, so I think he was medically clear the whole time. I don't even know if he had an injury to begin with. Did he?
I think he did.
Did he? Okay. Regardless, like if you do Jimmy and Jay, then you still need a 5th, and it's not 100% clear who that would be. Whereas if you don't, I don't think that's going to be the case. But if you only have Jimmy, then that also gives you Kevin and Randy, which to me seems more likely right now. I don't know who the 5th would be for the Bloodline, though, either. Like, is The Rock actually going to compete?
Hikuleo.
Well, he's going into NXT, though. I mean, unless they put him in a one-off and they're like, oh, psych, I'm going down to developmental, boys. See ya.
I mean, it's possible. I'd be okay with it.
I mean, I would be, too. Don't get me wrong. It would just be strange.
Yeah, so, like, to put the pieces together for a 5-on-5 matchup is still a little bit tricky. And I think if you bring Jay into it by then, you're going to probably have to have Kevin already turn and then side with the new Bloodline. Like, that doesn't really make any sense either, I don't think. So, and I don't think you're going to have any new names be on Roman's side. That doesn't make any sense. So,
I believe the lettering.
Flip. I mean, realistically, that's kind of what they're leaning towards because, Solo keeps disrespecting Jacob.
Could.
Well, then, where's Kevin's allegiances, too? I mean, you did see that the coloring of the letters on KO's shirt recently was blood red. Might be something to that.
I think, like, I find it hard to believe that Cody and Roman will lose this match. But at the same time, I feel like, again, if you want to keep this storyline going, it's the same situation that we were in at Money in the Bank, where it kind of feels like the Bloodline still needs to win. I don't know. It's a weird one to call. I think if The Rock gets involved in the Bloodline, 100% wins, though. I don't think The Rock is going to get involved. My gut says The Rock is not going to get involved, as much as I would like to see him. I think it's too soon. Unless he's competing at Crown Jewel against Cody.
That was a rumored match, I believe. Or was it Cody Roman 3? I also heard Cody Roman 3.
Yeah, I've also heard Cody Roman 3. I think inevitably there's a lot of chatter about Cody and Rock at WrestleMania, and I think that is the absolute wrong match to do. I think Roman Rock still needs to get done. And then it doesn't tie The Rock for another year of WrestleMania where he has to get that match in against Roman. If he's not able to for whatever reason, age, health, commitments, etc. So I think the logical booking there is if you have The Rock interfere and they win, then you have The Rock versus Cody at Crown Jewel. If it's for the title, who the fuck knows what happens there? I could actually see The Rock winning. But then you have a War Games match after that. There's a lot of different. That's what I'm saying. This whole card is like pretty unpredictable in that sense, outside of a couple matches, because
it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine with it.
We'll be tuned in. We'll be live. We'll be tweeting. I think we'll be commenting. But now we've already eaten into a lot, so I don't know how you guys feel about talking about the doc now. We're already an hour and a half in. We want to make sure we give it proper timing, but I also we don't really want this to be a 3-hour show. So are we good to go through it, but kind of stay moving as we go through, or?
Yeah, we'll call Brandon out if he goes on one of his tangents, Donny.
Oh, right. Sure. Single out. Oh, okay.
Single out.
You know what, boys? Let's fucking give her. Let's give her. We can cap her in under an hour. Easy. Easy
you know
peasy.
It's all love, brother.
All right, so episodes 4, 5, and 6 of the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix, starting with episode 4, Attitude. So this started with the tail end of the Montreal Screwjob, and then using that to generate the Mr. McMahon on-screen persona, and then talking about a lot of the Attitude Era stuff with Stone Cold, The Rock, DX, etc., and then kind of capping off with the tragic death of Owen Hart. What do you guys want to talk about for episode 4?
So I think it's okay to say that between the years of 98 to 2001, Mr. McMahon, the character, was the greatest heel in the history of wrestling.
I think it still goes to this day, yeah. That Attitude Era Mr. McMahon, I don't think has been touched as a heel by anybody in the industry.
No, he's definitely set a standard that many will attempt to replicate, but none will be able to duplicate. Like, you will never be able to, and no matter how bad it gets for Vince and for his history and for his reputation, you will never hear comparison. You'll never see like big boss type characters, even The Rock, without comparing them directly to Vince McMahon.
And it helps. Go ahead, Donnie.
Yeah, his over the top acting in that was just so unique for an authority character. There had been authority characters in time, and Eric Bischoff loved taking credit for saying he led Vince to create the Mr. McMahon character, but Eric was never over the top like this. Jack Tunney was never over the top. Gorilla Monsoon never over the top. Like Vince.
Even after the fact, Triple H, Stephanie, Adam Pearce for a time when he was a heel authority character. None of them could reach the heights of Vince.
No, not even close. Like his involvement, the things that Vince was willing to do for this character, both to show that he's an asshole and also to give the moments that, like the humbling moments that let the good guy, namely Stone Cold, get the one up on him pretty consistently throughout. Like,
I can't really call him a good
guy. He was.
According to Tony Atlas, there were no more good guys in wrestling.
Yeah. Well, we already talked about Tony Atlas last week, and I will leave that as just a footnote for this discussion. But
God damn it! But
standing 10 toes down on that one, Doc.
The anti-hero was what was popular back then, and even to this day, I mean, my favorite superhero is Deadpool, and he's not really a superhero,
Yeah, he's still a face. Like, in the face-heel dynamic of wrestling, he is the good guy. Like, the face is the good guy. Even if he was doing... Sorry. Even if he's doing, like, things that your poster boy good guy wouldn't do, like Cody, as an example, or Hulk Hogan in the 80s, he's still doing things that fans want to see against the anti. He is the protagonist, right? Like...
Right.
So,
but he was an anti-hero. That's the thing. And I mean, it was the perfect foil. It was the blue collar, beer drinking, ass kicking guy. And I mean, they did a proto Stone Cold in ECW. And if you guys have never seen any of his ECW promos when he was there, oh my God. WCW, where the big boys play with each other.
Monday NyQuil. Yeah, I don't know if you ever seen the promo of him that he did, kind of like when he's talking about going from WCW to ECW and just like how Dusty and Flair and Hogan never gave him chances, and he did spot on impressions of all of them. And he's like, "There's nobody. I'm going to become the superstar that I always knew that I could be." And just it was so cool just to see that spark in his eye. Like you could see Stone Cold in there, and just Paul putting all of his weight behind that and just shooting this guy to the moon while he had him because he knew he wasn't going to have him for long. Like, but he did everything he could to get Austin that platform and to make sure that he stayed over while he was there. So that was really cool to see. Yeah, Austin's character is definitely a bad guy in a sea of worse people. We'll say that.
I mean, he punched his boss in the face. Granted, his boss was an asshole. And, I've had a few bosses that are assholes, but I've never done that.
But it's right. He is the guy you live vicariously through,
And that's
in our weaker moments. You always just want to just duke someone in the face, right? Anybody who wrongs you, just clear him out the way. Bingo, bango.
That's what made him so good. Is that they said a lot that the best wrestling characters are their true selves turned up a little bit. I think for Vince, Mr. McMahon was Vince turned down with what we know now. And this wasn't really as big of an expose, the whole series, as what everybody was thinking. I think it was very much just, the story of Vince's rise and inevitable fall with the WWFE. But like some of the things that were said throughout the series that I didn't know, it was like, this fucking disgusting. But it was just two perfect foils in the right time, the right place, and it was just money. And it's a top 2 wrestling feud of all time. It's probably not number 2. I don't think it's ever going to be topped realistically.
No, it's definitely like an archetypical wrestling feud. Like it's like you're saying before, like it's one of those things that's going to be duplicated and has already been duplicated numerous times. But there is just something so special about that. Like, and to be like one of the first ones to I mean, it's the first one where like the boss character was directly involved physically, right? And for Vince to just take it to the levels he did to make himself a supervillain, the WWF's is the cleanest. It's the paragon. It's the standard for clean sportsmanship and no steroids. But then he comes out without a shirt on at 50 some odd years old, looking the way he does, and you're like, oh, okay, pal. A clear contradiction in your statements, but I mean that's Vince to a T, right? And he already claimed that much in his own character.
Dude was on gear, probably still to this day.
Dude had more gear than a fucking Texas locker room, man. It was crazy. And I mean, it's funny too because Vince talks about he quoted himself in the doc saying, "Perception is reality." Talked about like his character and himself, right? And then he also will say things like, "You can't change how people think about you," which I thought was very interesting. And it almost kind of seemed like Vince was kind of excusing his own behavior and excusing his own projections in his character by saying like, "Oh, well, people are just gonna see this and think this about me anyway, so fuck it, why not just roll with it?" I think that was in a way Vince kind of absolving himself for all the shit he did, like, and it stays in vein with him saying, "I don't feel guilty about anything. I don't regret a single thing that I've done, et cetera, et cetera." There's very little interesting tidbits of his character, of his values, just kind of nestled into the documentary at different places. But that was like right in the middle there. And I'm trying to remember at what point, but that was something that I felt like very much sounded like a Vinceism.
The other part, like I mentioned in the quick synopsis, was Over the Edge, May 23rd, 1999. Owen Hart's death and all the discussion associated to that. Part of that was Brett speculating that it was done against him, which I think is absolutely absurd. I understand being jaded at how the company treated you, but to think that Vince would murder somebody in an arena with 15,000 witnesses to get back at you, it's a bit much, but luckily, sorry, go ahead.
I will agree with him on this, is that they were definitely trying to bury Owen after the screw job.
Sure.
That's not even, we were trying to make him a star. You put him back in the fucking blue blazer. It's a dead on arrival gimmick. And you have one of the best pure wrestlers ever in Owen Hart. And, it's been speculated that he was going to be the original game before Triple H got the gimmick, which I don't know if that's true or not, but it would have made sense for Owen if they let him be a serious person, but it's, they were burying him, and it's not hard to see. And I think if you want the better story of this, the Dark Side of the Ring episode on Owen is fantastic. But they needed to stop the show. I don't care what the fucking Vince thinks. That was terrible. They needed to stop the show.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's classless to have the show happen with that. Like, to say that nobody saw it while his blood is in the ring and stuff like that, like.
I'm surprised you didn't have like more people walking out or trying to get out of contracts during that time. I'm surprised you didn't see a much larger exodus of people just saying, when I'm done with this contract, fuck Vince, I'm out. But I mean, yeah, really Taker.
As soon as after that, WCW was on a downturn, and where else were they going to go? They could have went to Japan, but Japan really didn't start popping off till mid 2010s.
Yeah, there wasn't really much place for them to go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you had like All Japan was semi, but it wasn't anywhere near the level of anything that Ted Turner or Vince could provide. But
well, yeah, a lot more risk too. The culture shock associated to it, like it wasn't normal for English-speaking wrestlers to go to Japan for like it was outliers more than anything else, right? There's a lot of risk, there's a lot of culture shock to that. Like, it's definitely not for everybody. So
right, and I mean, you had guys like Norton and stuff. Scott Norton being like the prime example from WCW that I can think of, who was back and forth there. Same with Vader. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like it wouldn't have borne the same. I mean, it was an alternative, right? It was something you could do to say, like, at least stand on a moral basis. But I mean, it was 98 too. So I mean, WCW wasn't, I think, on a huge downturn at that point. Like, and who's to say how it could have gone?
It was May 99.
Because
this happened in the middle of 1999. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know why I was thinking 98. Well, by 99, yeah, then you probably could start seeing traces of the downward trajectory for WCW by that point. But still, I mean, that would be so hard for me to look Vince in the eye and collect a check from him after that shit happened. But I mean, hey, look at Taker. Taker's been, still to this day, would take a bullet for Vince, and he was visibly shook after that all happened too, when he had to have his match. So, I don't know. Money talks.
Episode 4 really didn't have much for the true wrestling aficionado that we didn't already know. Was there anything else you guys wanted to cover for episode 4?
They did do a little bit on The Rock. Just want to say I've said it to you guys, like, he's the most pure sports entertainer in pro wrestling. I know, I like to say I was professional wrestling, but you get sports entertained with Dwayne. He's made chicken salad out of chicken shit. so many times, including this year. And Rock Austin's the second biggest rivalry of the Attitude Era, and it was incredible. And I also liked that every time Vince said something that they had a proof of contradiction on, they pointed out, that no one got killed, there was no rape, no use of knives or guns, and then they just showed clips of everything to be like, you're a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
I liked that. It wasn't a gotcha piece like Bruce Pritchard said, but it was very much like, we're just showing that Vince and Mr. McMahon are one and the same, if not Vince is a little more Mr. McMahon than he likes to say.
I was shocked to see The Rock showed up at the RNC. They showed that there pretty quick. I was like, wow, I never knew. But but I mean, right, it's The Rock, and he goes where he's going to be the most entertaining and draw the most eyes. So that probably could have been a pure performance move on his part as well. I'd probably have to actually go and find that clip and see if he actually genuinely spoke on the matter, because that was when I think Bush was running. That would have been 2000 if I recall correctly. That would have been with W. But I mean, just a lot of it too is tying in with the theme of Vince. One of the last things Vince said about the Owen Hart situation was it was pure egocentrism, where he goes, well, I would have wanted the show to go on if it was me. If I would have died in that scenario, then wheel me out, keep the show going.
It's not what you want though. That's the thing, that a lot of these decisions that Vince made, he veiled, it's so weird. It's a conundrum with Vince, because it's he does all this stuff. He has this inherent awareness of what people want, but then decisions come like this where it's no, the average person would not want to see this if they knew what happened. But you did it because you think they wanted it, or you think you wanted it. It's very confusing. Sometimes he has the pulse of people, and sometimes he doesn't. And this was definitely a case where he did not.
Right. It's a very, very strange duality in his senses, because, right, he can sense the broader overarching body, right? The collective, right? He can sense where trends are going. He can sense what people want to see, and he can play to that. But then when it comes to, dialing in the microscope and seeing the individuals and really acknowledging them and their feelings and their nuances, that's where he just completely fucking loses the script. And I don't mean that, and I mean that literally in the sense as well, because right, that whole script for that show should have just been tossed the moment Owen was, wheeled out of the arena there. But I mean, right, like Vince says, the show must go on, and he's like, people didn't pay to see a man die; they paid to see a show. And that was so fucking telling of where Vince stands in relation to his employees, not just, and also to his personal life, but particularly in this case to his employees, because that could have been literally fucking anybody in my mind. That could have been, that could have been The Undertaker. That could have been Brett. Huh?
It easily could have been Shane.
It could have been Shane too, right? And he would have just said, oh, well, I'll mourn it later. Put the show on and I'll apologize later.
I was looking
Vince is all about that too. He's good about public appearances.
I was looking to see if there was anything actually impactful that happened on that show to warrant keeping it going. The main event, Undertaker did beat Stone Cold for the WWF Championship. So
do it the next night on Raw. Who fucking cares?
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, from his perspective, I get it, but I'm saying from his perspective, it's well, we have something really, really big happening. It's got to actually happen or something. I don't know. I'm not justifying it, but then maybe that could have been in his head as well to make it. There's no other title changes on the show.
And really, too, in hindsight, look at how many title changes occurred during the Attitude Era. You look back at the history of the WWF Championship in that time period, and your average length of a championship reign was pretty commonly under 100 days. So even if the Undertaker
did not under 60,
that's what I'm saying. If the Undertaker didn't win the championship at that pay-per-view, oh, God help us, Stone Cold Steve Austin's going to hold the championship for another 30 days or so until people get their chance to mourn, I get it. Like, right? It's a big, but like, save it. It'll be fine. Your biggest star is your champion, and if he loses the belt a month later on, you're not going to lose sales over it. You're not going to lose sleep over it. Clearly, you don't lose sleep over anything, but particularly not in this case.
I don't think the man even sleeps.
To the gym at 4 o'clock
Very
in the
likely.
morning, right?
That's pretty common though. There's a lifestyle built around that kind of shit. That's a whole other thing. But I'm not one of those guys, but I know people who are, and they're knuck and futs. But hey, more power to them. They're hitting PRs. Anywho, sorry, I didn't mean to tangent, boys.
All good. I think that leads us to episode 5, which was titled "Family Business." And in this episode, it talked about WWF going public on the New York Stock Exchange, the buyout of WCW, and how that ended the Monday Night War, the creation of multiple other WWF business entities, the XFL, their casino and hotel and restaurant.
That all failed.
Yep. The lost lawsuits, the World Wildlife Fund, The Rock and Stone Cold leaving, and a lot of discussion on Shane McMahon and his relationship with his father, and then the start of the Ruthless Aggression era.
They did bring up the Playboy interview at the beginning of the episode. I know we kind of brought it up last episode ourselves. I will say this: look it up at your own risk, viewers. It's fucking gross. Fighting, infighting, and incest is a fucked up childhood. But it's, I mean, I only read some excerpts from it, and it got my stomach churning. So.
Again, bit by bit, kind of lending to what made Vince what he was. And I mean, kudos to whoever put the doc together to kind of lump, some of these little beginning story, these origin excerpts into it, kind of show what made Vince what he was. And I mean, Vince, his mentality of, well, if you're breathing, then you win. Didn't subscribe to the notion of abuse begetting abuse and generations passing down, right? So Vince didn't subscribe to the fact that he was projecting any sort of abuse onto his children or any sort of negligent or harmful feeling. I think like it was crazy because you get to the part where Stephanie, right, and Stephanie has been kind of touted up, and that's more evident, I think, in episode 6, where Stephanie is kind of set to be the foil to Vince McMahon. She's obviously going to be a successor, with Shane, kind of being the guy who he is. Just a nicer guy. Stephanie's got more of that cutthroat instinct, but then in the beginning, she was very much like this, sweet on-screen character who then got Mickey'd by Trips and then effectively, inferred to be raped. But then like after all that, like she's getting chance that she's a slut, which is really bizarre. But that's kind of like how I feel like that's how they were kind of. Vince was probably writing. It was crazy. And just I feel like that's also kind of a way Vince was kind of steering the narrative to make it seem like that was the case too. Like, oh, she secretly liked it. And if anybody would have an idea like that, like it Vince up and down. You know what I mean? And certainly not the last of Vince's twisted, ideas surrounding his daughter in the company, right? As was evidenced in the episode. Like, holy fuck, like I mean, this might be episode 6 here. I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but in the case of episode 5, let's see here. Going through my notes. It was episode 5. No,
yeah,
it was the fucking repugnant pregnancy storyline suggestion that Vince got Stephanie pregnant through some hook or crook, and
how would you even think that would be entertaining? That's disgusting on all levels. and illegal in a lot of states, not all of them, which is
Is it actually not? Is it actually legal in some states? That's crazy. I find that hard to
yeah,
believe.
I don't know that it's
shame us
explicitly
Americans.
outlawed.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
there's definitely some weird nuances in state law.
Yikes. Okay,
On
I'm
a
not
federal
getting into
level,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, let's not. Ugh, God.
Yeah, that was a pretty cringe. That was something that, again, at least it wasn't, as a wrestling, someone who's followed this kind of stuff. This is technically not a surprise to know that that was a thing, as gross as it was. And there's been a lot of
Well,
discussion and speculation on that over the years.
look at the storylines that they started doing after WCW closed, because it was very much the product dropped off because it was a company that did not know what it was doing. You had Katie Vick,
Oof.
all of Vince's affairs with the talent, which also I didn't know he had a bunch of shoot affairs besides the ones that we knew that came out recently. So there was that.
Oh, they don't really say specifically who and how many.
But
They specify.
He brought it up in the Playboy interview. That's why I say.
Yes.
Um, his feud with God,
That didn't get brought
the
up at
kid.
all.
Yeah, it did.
Did it?
Yeah, they had him in the church where he drank the holy water and tried to spit it like Triple H, and then
Oh,
he
yes.
said,
Yeah, they had that, but they didn't outright say he was feuding with God. They had that
"But
clip in there.
we, as the wrestling fans, know that he
Yes.
feuded with and had a match with God that he won."
Yes.
Uh, the Kiss My Ass Club. I mean, it's just there were so many just gross storylines in Ruthless Aggression.
Yeah.
and then it wasn't mentioned, but like the Gene Snitsky thing too, like
Punting the baby.
mocking Lita for having a miscarriage because Kane like raped her, and then
Yeah.
she conceived, and then punting a fake baby into the crowd, like just completely fucking tasteless.
Or I think this is the biggest one, is that Vince wanted to put the real life marriage of Steph and Triple H on pay-per-view and
Who
called
would
Steph
actually
selfish for saying no.
who actually
Who
would want to
could?
watch that? Like, really, because he's like, who wants to see a normal wedding on pay-per-view? Like, who would pay money? Like, are you paying money under the thought that some nonsense would happen?
Oh yeah, this is gonna be awesome.
And
Well,
then it
that's
just ends up
such good shit.
and then it just ends up being a normal wedding, and then what the hell?
And then a week before the wedding, he has that I Quit match on pay-per-view with Steph, which is uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, it was tough. Yeah, I remember I didn't actually watch the match, but I watched like they'll have like the clips of the pay per view, the Raw after or whatever, the SmackDown after, and just like for the time when I was younger, like just seeing like the images of like Shane or Vince, throwing stuff around and then like choking her out with a lead pipe and shit as Linda's screaming for him to stop. Like I'm just like, this is just why the fuck would you put this on television? You know,
Yep.
this is just yeah, I'm not going to go deep into personal shit with it, but like it was just it's not something, and especially too, right, when you have her wedding that's coming up and you're kind of using this as sort of like your own, it's kind of like a projection of your own feelings towards Steph, probably because she didn't go along with your batshit crazy idea of putting her wedding on pay-per-view where you, I'm sure, would likely feature in it and profit from it because your name is on everything and your name is on Stephanie still, and I don't, it's all just reeked.
And I mean, it's this whole episode was really a microcosm of like what the fuck is going on in Vince's head. Like he had him not remembering Sable suing him for sexual harassment, and then his response is, "Well, she came back to work. It's like, that's disgusting. And then
he's not wrong.
Yeah, but then as soon as,
He's not.
as soon as she comes back,
Hold on. I did a lot of shit. Deserves to get a lot of shit for a lot of the shit that he did. Why'd she come back? To know that she's going to be in that same role again. I don't get it. I honestly don't understand.
That's the biggest thing, is that immediately after bringing her back, after she's sued for sexual harassment, the storyline she's in is that she's in a affair with Vince. Like, what the actual fuck?
I felt bad. You know who I felt really bad for in all of that? Mark Miro.
Oh yeah,
Sable's husband at the time.
Mark Miro.
Oh my God, he got dragged through the mud with, and his name was never even brought up, but like he was dragged through with everything, with like, right, because Sable standing on her principles, leaving the WWF, trying to sue Vince, then going back because Vince probably put it in her head, like he probably does with all of his old enemies, right? Because that's kind of the thing with Vince, is that even if you leave the WWF and Vince, you never really leave. There's always opportunities and there's always money to be made in coming back and kind of foiling yourself against Vince. Look at Brett. Brett comes back, buries the hatchet with Shawn, goes after Vince. Hulk Hogan wrestles way past his shelf life, has to have his match with Vince. Shawn has to have this match with Vince in spite of all the fallings out that they've had, the personal histories that they have. There always has to be that one off with Vince because that's a marquee attraction in Vince's head, I'm sure. Maybe in some cases it actually reflects in reality, but Vince has always been good about selling and, selling on screen, selling as a businessman. And then I'm sure he put it in Sable's head being like, hey, and Stephanie even stated it directly, like it was a very recent lawsuit that happened. She came back in what, like 2002 or three, something like that. Sable did as an on-screen character. And I mean, that's in the scheme of things, like that only happened less than 5 years ago. Like that's not long at all. And then Sable's just immediately like, fuck it, there's money to be made here. And then she goes around and she's doing all this shit. Like she's effectively like one of Vince's mistresses, like, like Trish before her and like Candice Michelle. And, like it's just where do your fucking morals lie? And I'm not trying to be an old fart or an old fuck and try and get on a grandstand about morality, right? But I mean, in this case, I feel like it's pretty clear cut that there's some cognitive dissonance in here. And I mean, I feel like it does a disservice to the people you're trying to defend, i.e., like women in workplaces where they're facing similar kinds of scenarios, when you're just like, yeah, he did it, and I would be willing to stake my reputation and my finances on it. But there's more finances and reputation to be made if I were to go back and play this out a little bit. You know what I mean?
That's the part that I have a tough time with, right? Like, the women that he talked about in this episode, they talked about Trish a lot, and Trish never said anything bad about Vince. She said there were some storylines that she didn't agree with or didn't feel necessarily the most comfortable with doing, but you'll notice very clearly she doesn't say anything negative about Vince at all. She actually goes out of her way to say, like, doing those things, I didn't feel comfortable, didn't want it, but at the end of the day, that's the reaction that you want to get out of the crowd. That's what we wanted to do. Right. And then that was like, it got her bought into it. Maybe she's young and naive at the time, possibly, sure, but like, she just said nothing negative about Vince. And then in Sable's case, like, sure, she wasn't on the show and now you can't bring her up at all for whatever reason. I don't exactly know what that is, but she came back. I don't get it. Like, I do get it, but I also don't get it. You can't take the moral high ground and the bag and come back for more. Like, something's got to give there.
Right.
I don't know.
I think a part of it is that, it's known that Vince is always about repairing burnt bridges. So the only one he did not repair was the one with CM Punk. And that, he came back because of Paul Levesque, not Vince McMahon, which is weird to say, but
Well, also because of Jack Perry too, but
yeah,
Tony Khan,
I think it's
the Elite.
I don't know. This whole episode, it just seemed like it was very much just, it was more about how Shane wanted to take over for a good half of it. Shane seemed to be like ahead of the game with a lot of things. Like he wanted to buy the UFC.
Yeah, what
He
a missed
wanted
opportunity that was.
he wanted to put ECW online as a streaming thing because he saw streaming as the future of everything. He was ahead of the game on that. But Paul Heyman's story on Vince and Shane is just like, it's chilling. You know what I mean? Shane had this idea that he believed in, and Vince was eating probably a steak, took the knife and said, "Right here, do it, take over. Otherwise, I know that you're not man enough to do it, or you can buy me out, like I bought my father out. But you're gonna have to completely push me out, and I know you're not man enough to do it." It's just, I think.
and that's
Go ahead, Brandon.
probably a large reason why Shane ultimately didn't become Vince's successor either. I bet that mentality. I bet that was probably one of many episodes between Shane and Vince where Shane kind of got the idea of like, okay, this is how the family business goes. Like, this is. I mean, did Shane want to take it over? I could see it, but then right, it would probably require a lot of like radical um, changes, I guess, from like the boss's position relating down to and Stephanie. And I feel like it's another one of those weird alternate reality things, right? Where you look at like what could the WWE have looked like with Shane in charge. I feel like Stephanie and Triple H as a tandem both do very good. Um, but yeah, I mean it's really unfortunate. And then yeah, Stephanie talked about the unique relationships between fathers and sons too. About like, and it's sad too because I feel like even if Shane were in charge, you got to believe that Vince would be pressing even harder from the shadows on Shane than he probably is or was on Stephanie. And I mean, Vince's involvement was enough for Stephanie to step out of the picture entirely for a little while there. Well, I think she still is for the most part.
He essentially pushed his daughter out of the company because he wanted to make a power play to make more money.
Mm.
Which is an
Very
episode
Vince.
6 talking.
Well, we'll get into that in 6, but I think there's some discussion to be had there too. The last thing I wanted to talk about, less on Vince's personality, but just as a businessman, he really sucks at businesses that aren't professional wrestling, eh?
Yep.
Everybody's got their niche, you know?
And when he's pressed on it in an interview, he wants to strangle the interviewer.
Yeah, it's
I thought it was hilarious that he tried to start a football company but didn't really give a shit about football. And I feel like football is a market where if you're going to delve into it, you really should know what the fuck you're talking about. And you really should have a passion for the game.
He did it
and
twice.
not just feel it, which is fucking wild.
Both times.
Right. You'd think you would have learned from your first failure, but that was one of those weird things where Vince.
Second time was more COVID than Vince, but.
I mean, fair, but still, I don't know that anybody was necessarily. I mean, maybe Vince learned from his mistakes, and who knows? But I don't. I don't see Vince changing by virtue of his personality. I don't see him changing or adapting all that much with his approach to football or producing football or his vision of football, whatever the fuck that may be. Just injury, concussions everywhere, and good luck passing an XFL.
He wanted to make football WWE, and WWE is it's its own
WWE. It's WWE, right? You can't, and especially like if XFL failed in its own time, like especially with the changes that have been going on in the NFL and in pro sports in general, like I don't know how you expected an XFL prototype or archetype to be successful in the 2020s. It would have been a trick to say the least.
That I think that leads us to episode 6. Yeah.
I believe so.
All right. So the last episode, it's called The Finish. Starts off with the storyline of Mr. McMahon's death on an episode of Raw. But that was scrapped due to the Chris Benoit double murder suicide. That led to Christopher Nowinski working with the WWE to adapt better care for the talent to avoid brain damage, brain trauma, CTE. It brought in the wellness policy, banning certain in-ring moves, and then also inevitably went PG shortly thereafter. Stephanie and Paul doing more production, Shane returning, new business opportunities with WWE Network and then Peacock, and then the tail end from 2022 onwards with Vince stepping down, coming back, resigning, and selling all his shares. So, where do you guys want to start?
Let's start with the beginning of this episode. Vince talking with the doc crew and saying it's hard for him to pay attention to things, that he has 3 computers in his head, and one's telling him what to say, the other one's thinking of something else, and the other one's doing something else. And doc crew asks, so what's your other brain thing? And he's like, oh, it's something fun, and it's sex.
Yeah, I thought it was very unsurprising to hear that Vince has a constantly active sexual other in his brain, like an alter of sorts.
And with what we know now, it's
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and likely an unfortunate byproduct of his upbringing as well, at least if all the allegations of his past are to be believed. It's a very common thing. Unfortunately, you see that a lot. You see a lot of like inappropriate sexual expression coming from people who have had like sexual traumas in their past too. Like I've seen it in my own line of work, even, not to get too far down that road, but it lends credence to like why he did it, why he was how he was, but it doesn't excuse it at the same time. Like people like that do have to be held accountable. And I mean, it's I don't know. I had something I was going to say about that particular thing, but I mean, obviously, like that probably could be another podcast. I don't want to go like again down the psychological deep dive rabbit hole on that part, but people like that it also just kind of explains why he was so like just driven in general too. Like he just had a constant drive. He had something in his head that was constantly active. The gears were constantly turning. He couldn't go on vacation without thinking about work. He couldn't, probably couldn't sleep without, come up with like 2 or 3 new bogus storylines to throw and spitball at the wall, But yeah, on the note of, I guess like speaking not necessarily of psychology, but of like neurology, right? On the note of CTE, I was actually kind of surprised to hear a guy like Stone Cold Steve Austin, and even I think to the Undertaker to a lesser extent, be like, oh, no, I'm not really a CTE guy. I don't really believe all that shit about.
I'm surprised, man. Come on, you're surprised?
A little bit. I mean, I could see them defending the business, sure, but when it comes to like actually looking at something that neuroscientists, Harvard, not just a gimmick, Harvard educated scientists are looking at, and they're showing people because they care and they see a disturbing trend, not just in pro wrestling, but in all sports, and they want this shit to stop. And they can look at that and be like, nah. And Taker's like, yeah, he's all about defending the chair shots. Like you can't work those. You have to have a legit chair to the head.
Mark Calloway and Steve Austin are not the pinnacles of educational knowledge. Like, let's be real honest here. Like,
No.
did either of these guys even go to post-secondary? Never mind finish post-secondary. Like,
I'm American. Are you talking high school or college?
I'm talking
Is that
college.
Canadian?
Okay.
Like secondary
Sorry.
school is high school. Sorry. Yeah. Like,
Speak American, Donny.
yeah.
No,
So,
I'm just kidding.
so I'm looking, Undertaker dropped out 1 year into university. And Steve Austin, let's see. Did he even go?
Probably not. Maybe.
Junior college.
He played college football.
It doesn't even say if he graduated, though.
But since we're on the topic of CTE, I think it's a segue to the Benoit tragedy, which, you know, what Vince was saying about the diving headbutt, he really, you know, it's a work. It's this.
It just went
Dark
nuts.
Side of the Ring was very, like, the Dark Side of the Ring episode on Benoit, probably the best 2 episodes of the series in my eyes. The guy who wrote Ring of Hell, he said Harley Race did the diving headbutt first for the most part, and he told Dynamite Kid, "Don't do it. It fucks up your spine. It fucks you up." Dynamite Kid does the diving headbutt. He, for the last like 15 years of his life, was in a wheelchair. He tells Benoit not to do it. Benoit does it, and CTE all around. There were other issues with Benoit with CTE, but he was getting dropped on his head constantly. He took chair shots to the back of the head. And I'm not trying to humanize or say how he went crazy. You know, fuck that guy 100%.
Well, and on the note of the Dynamite Kid too, like never mind like the stark personality that you saw come out of him, you know, I'm sure as a result of all the head trauma too. Like you have numerous examples, like Phineas Gage being the primary example. If you go to it's like 101, right? Like railroad spike through the head causes this normally nice guy to suddenly, you know, he survives it, but he's drastically different. If your brain incurs damage or trauma, you become effectively a different person. So it stands perfectly to reason that this could have happened with Benoit or Dynamite Kid or various. It happened with there's a famous football case too, but that's another thing, you know. But there's various examples of this being a reality.
Benoit was on steroids from the middle of the 80s and was abusing steroids despite passing the wellness policy. Vince can say, "Oh, this is just a man who went crazy," but all these factors play a part in what happened that weekend, and it's very much he's just making it you know, he's just trying to say, "Oh, we didn't play a part," and I'm not saying they did, but you know, Nowinski looked at Benoit's brain and he had CTE.
Right.
And it's kind of clear to me that, like, with wrestlers who die young, Vince really has no sympathy, if any. No empathy, for sure. And I think the biggest talking point, not with wrestlers dying, but with the concussions and not having sympathy, is Vince thinking The Undertaker did not have a concussion when he lost the streak. And him losing the streak is what caused him to, you know, have this blackout from that match. You can re-watch that match and you could see that his bell is fucking rung. Like, his eyes are there.
And the irony of the operative term that he used too. Oh, he was traumatized by the loss of the streak. You know, I mean, and I'm sure, right? Like, I'm sure Taker was pretty, you know, aghast at the notion, you know, minutes or hours before the show went on the air that, yeah, we're going to put Brock over you and just end the 21-0 streak, right? After all that time. But I mean, I just thought it was funny that Vince would want to use the word traumatized as the operative term in defining like what happened to the Undertaker. Like, yes, he was legitimately physically traumatized. That is what happened to the Undertaker.
And not only that, Vince left WrestleFucking-Mania to go to the hospital with the Undertaker.
Right. So what is that saying exactly?
Is like Vince is working himself into a shoot or whatever the fuck Hulk Hogan said on Twitter that one time.
Work yourself into a shoot, but you're shooting so hard that you don't know you're working no more. There's a whole fucking pretzel argument with that.
HH, kiss.
I thought it was a. Sorry, were you? No, I thought it was an interesting, a stark omission rather. I know they talked about Benoit, and I think they might have mentioned Eddie Guerrero too, about like how young wrestlers are dying, right? And this is the reason why you need to implement an effective and strict wellness policy. But like, I thought it was crazy. Like, I mean, yeah, they had guys who were in their mid 30s and stuff dying, and that's very, very young, right? But I mean, I was surprised that they omitted, and it was a couple of years after the wellness policy got put in place, because I believe they started that in probably like 2005 or something like that. It was like shortly after Eddie died, I want to say. But they really, really came down on it with Benoit. But a couple of years later, and this kind of ties into the narrative point of like, well, these guys are dying, and like, well, nobody seems to care. Let's just keep churning out. I don't know if you guys remember Lance Cade at all, but he was like one of Shawn Michaels' proteges. He was in a team with Trevor Murdoch in like the Ruthless Aggression era there. I think like
underrated team.
Yeah, late noughts, early 2010s. Lance Cade, he's this bigger dude, right? Like 6'5", 260, something like that. Had a good look about him. Dead at 29.
Oh yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Even that.
From polysubstance abuse and heart failure at 29 years old, which is fucking wild. And like there was stuff leading up to it too. Like there was like a month or so prior to his actual death. Like I think his fiance or whomever noted that he wasn't looking good. Like his health was bad, but he suffered from significant drug abuse, particularly painkillers. Which I mean, you look at a lot of the other, like what's one of the arguably the biggest, drug abuses besides steroids in pro wrestling, probably painkillers, I would have to imagine. And I mean, just Lance, I feel like was a victim of that culture as well. And I mean, right, to hear of guys dying in their 30s of that kind of stuff is one thing, but dude, 29, like you didn't even make it to 30 and your heart gives out on you. And you're, by all accounts, like an athletic, big, healthy dude. Like, and to be in a position too where like, right, he was Shawn Michaels' protege. They had mentioned that in storyline, I believe, because I think they had him saddled with Chris Jericho while he was world heavyweight champion. And that was he was kind of like the Alex Riley to Chris Jericho's Miz in a sense, where like they kind of look like each other. He's modeling off of Chris, and Lance is kind of airing some grievance about Shawn. And you're like, oh, this is going to lead to something, but it just didn't happen. I think he got released, and the painkiller addiction got worse, and it led to him dying. And I'm surprised they didn't even bring him up at all. But that was the one for me where like when I was looking to go into
he wasn't actually
pro wrestling myself,
died,
like I was going to do the Christian thing, jump ship, and then he dies, and then I'm like, wow, young guys are dying, so it's like maybe this isn't even worth it.
He wasn't actually employed though by WWE when he died, right? That's probably why they didn't bring it up.
Right, but still, I mean, I feel like his issues with you could argue that like his issues with painkillers or like the reasons he needed to take them in the first place may have been from. I mean, I have to go back and look at like a lot of the latter end of his career, but I'd have to believe that a good part of that came from the pro wrestling lifestyle.
Yeah. It's also a microcosm of the 1980s and 90s WWE, because you had to fight for your spot. If you got injured, you'd lose your spot. And then they would just be working injured and be taking pills and mixing them with drinks. And it would cause this toxic cocktail of stuff inside. And, pretty sure that's what killed Mr. Perfect, the Big Boss Man, people like that were, big in
Umaga,
early 90s. And, their heart just stopped because they couldn't do it anymore. So, rest in peace to all those who We lost so young. It's just, it's terrible.
Right. Well, to that point you made too, just a brief little thing too, Don. But I mean, I don't think Test was employed by WWE, but they still included him in the doc.
No, he
I
wasn't.
think
But
he was a TNA guy at the time.
he had been like, I think it was only just a year after. Like I don't know the timelines on everybody, but
Sure.
I think most of it they were trying to focus on like recency to WWE. How long was Lance Cade out of WWE before he passed away?
I want to say close to a year.
Let me take a look here. 2008 departure, 2010 death. About 2.5 years. Looks like
2.5 years.
About 2 years. Yeah, let's say about 2 years.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah,
but still,
I don't know.
Right.
Like Lance, like I get where you're coming from with your personal investment for Lance Cade, but I mean he was never remotely close to a notable name. Like comparing to Tess, like Tess was literally like supposed to marry the boss's daughter, right? And that was a huge storyline for him. And he was also rehired by WWE as well. He didn't only have one stint; he had multiple stints in WWE while trying to fight through his drug issues. So, I guess there's only so many they could list, and they wanted to get some sort of like Tess was brought up in the actual documentary before in the wedding angle prior to another ridiculous story that came up, but.
Right.
I want to get more into though a couple parts here with the business side, and then we'll go into the tail end part. Just in the interest of time here, we're already at 2.5 hours, and we still have basically 2 more sections to cover. So sponsorship and business management in the 2010s, switching to PG, getting more sponsors, launching the WWE Network and Peacock. Do we want to say that this was as a result of the era, or was this more of a result of like the awareness to the negative effects of wrestling, and the obligation to do that just to not get canceled?
Yeah, I think the money was the motivator. Vince, The Rock had said it earlier. I think it was The Rock who said it, that Vince only sees green. So and he follows trends too, right? So if it's easier for him, he's not going to work harder. He's going to work smarter at this stage. So if there's more money to potentially be made with sponsorship deals in, taking the hit on the ratings, then, or on the rating specifically, I should say, then that's what he's going to do. And that's what he did. And in the long term, like,
sorry, that was our friend
I don't know.
Tony Atlas that gave that quote.
Okay. How could I misattribute? But I feel like in the long run, like in hindsight, right, like it was probably for the best because Vince did make the most money, and it's one of those idioms, right? Absence makes the heart grow fonder. So you're seeing a lot more of like a return to form with the wrestling that people, right, kind of grew to love during the 90s and the 2000s. Coming up nowadays, like little by little, you're seeing it, right? And it's generating new interest, and it's maintaining the old interest because you still have that same fan base that probably jumped on during that era when it was more friendly for them too. Right. Like, I mean, you wouldn't have Hollywood Hogan without the real American Hulk Hogan, the all American can do no wrong babyface, right? You need to have that kind of polarity in order to generate an appeal. So in the long stretch, I mean, it was a fucking drag to get through as a fan at that time, right? Like, I mean, I know you love you some John Cena, Pierce. Oh, fuck me. I couldn't say enough about John Cena.
The TV PG switch was a large part for the advertisers, but they also, after the Benoit tragedy, they had to really switch gears. And
oh yeah, it would have happened a lot quicker and harder than it would have normally, I'm sure.
And I mean, it's very much, it was, they needed kids like Superman. It's as simple as that.
Yep, makes sense. They have to have a poster boy to the PG movement, right? And Cena did make sense in that regards with the persona that was put out there. The last part here on, June 2022, Vince stepping down amidst allegations, coming back, and then resigning. A couple interesting points I want to bring up there. They didn't really talk about what Steph was doing at that time. So she had gone on a leave of absence a couple months before. I believe it was in May of 2022, or April or May, just after WrestleMania. And then the news comes out with this scandal associated to Vince. Vince steps down. She comes back and becomes co-CEO or co-chairman with Nick Khan. And that lasts for about 6 months.
Give or take.
And then Vince comes back and she outright resigns. I want to get your guys' thoughts on. They didn't say, obviously, anything about her leave of absence in the first place, and they certainly didn't give any reasons why she stepped down. But what are your guys' thoughts on that whole dynamic there with her taking a leave and then coming back and then resigning? Like, there's a lot of speculation that it was Stephanie who pushed Vince out in the first place.
She could have blew the whistle. It's very possible. I feel like she had to have known something was going on, especially with the current lawsuit. If you've read parts of it, I've read most of it, and it's disgusting. A lot of it was happening at Titan Towers, and guess who has an office at Titan Towers?
Mm-hmm.
It's all speculative, but I feel like Steph probably was part of the driving force for pushing him out, and then as soon as he came back in, he kicked her to the curb. So,
Brandon, you could
definitely. Yeah, there was definitely an air of contention between Steph and her father around the tail end there, because I think Stephanie, like, you could see with Vince, like, he was just a relic of a bygone era by that point. And with like all the philanthropy that Stephanie was doing and all the marketing she was trying to do for WWE to, give it a more positive reputation and a public face. I think there was a direction that Stephanie wanted to go with the company that did not involve Vince in it at all. So, and then besides which, like, Heyman got in Stephanie's ear, and I think you alluded to it, Pierce, where he's like, he's put you in this position to battle you. Like, with no other like nemesis that Vince like feasibly really had, like, he had to, in his last grasp for power, like, try to create this dynamic between himself and his own daughter to try and like hold that last vestige of control that he could possibly have. And I'm sure he saw the writing on the wall too. Like, as he got older, Vince definitely, from what people were saying, was starting to seem like more agreeable with things. Like, he wasn't fighting as hard as he normally would on things. Even though he still obviously has his opinions on things, and obviously in his own mind, he can do no wrong. But I mean, right, Stephanie, what's that?
He did quite a lot of wrong.
Oh yeah, and that, not in his own mind. In Stephanie's mind, though, that was certainly the case, and that's why I would believe that if Vince was going to be in the company, then she didn't see a place for herself in it, because Vince's dream and his vision is what it is, and that it doesn't align with Stephanie's at all. They have similar mentalities about things.
I'm going to counter that a little bit with just the information that was presented. So Steph went on her leave of absence. We don't really know why that was. The timing of it, there was no context to why that would be, but that could have been right around the time she potentially was a whistleblower, right? And then Vince resigns after the news story comes out, and clearly over the span of 6 months, he's not thrilled about this, and
yeah, he didn't see himself retiring, and he told other people who want to retire, go die.
Yeah,
I guess he did not want to die.
So
I mean, his health's failing if reports are to be believed, but
Usually, people like that tend to live forever.
It's sympathy for when he goes in front of a jury.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
But anyway, so he gets a unanimous vote against him coming back, but he forces his way back onto the board under the premise that it's for the sale of the company. My speculation here is that it could very well have been Stephanie that was the whistleblower for no fault of her own. Like, the guy's does something terrible. You're tipped off on it. You don't think he should be part of the company anymore. You're probably going to do due diligence to try and make that happen, right? But Vince gets jaded over it. And maybe during that time, he decides, you know what? Like, fuck my kids. My daughter tried to force me out maliciously. My son has always, never seen eye to eye with him. He comes back and he says, I'm here to sell the company, and tells Stephanie to her face, like, you're getting nothing. Like, I'm not giving you anything. So what's her reason to be there then if she's not getting anything? I don't know. I could see Vince doing that.
It's just in
character. Yeah, that's Vince's level of petty.
Like, for her to outright resign, she still held her shares. Like, Vince couldn't take those away from her because, it's a tangible investment tied to her name. But like everything else, like his own thing, like he is technically free to assign his wealth to whoever and however he wants when the time comes that he dies, if there's anything left. Makes sense to me.
Well, and the WWE had kind of outlived its reputation as a family-owned business too, like with the sale to TKO, or to Endeavor rather. I mean, it doesn't matter if there's a McMahon sitting in the chair or not. That's really more for nostalgia purposes than anything at that point.
Yep.
So I mean, right, the writing kind of is on the wall in that regard. So it probably makes it a little easier for him to say it.
With that, as soon as the sale took place, the product was immediately better when Vince retired, quote unquote, and was no longer in the creative chair.
The first PLE that Vince was out for, and would have still been largely under Vince's direction, but Triple H.
That first match, and then all those people came back, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is Hunter's show.
Yep.
As soon as that sale happened, that Monday at Raw, Vince was there and was in the creative chair, and you could tell because it was one of the worst episodes of Raw they ever put out. And now that he's completely gone, it's for the best. And, all those people saying, would Vince retire? No. Booker T said it best. A nuclear bomb would need to explode for Vince to retire, and a bomb did explode. So
I want to end this with a question that they asked a lot of the people that were on the show. And I mean, they were asked prior to the news that came out in 2022 and onwards, but what is the legacy of Vince McMahon?
A visionary promoter with a sketchered personal life.
Yeah, Vince is the duality of man. He is the height of ambition, and he's also the depth of depravity. Like, he succumbs to all of those id impulses that you hear about, the things that our monkey lizard brains need gratified, and we don't give a shit who we step over to get it. But at the same time, you look at what he basically took from the ground, not necessarily the ground, but he took something that was good and he made it outstanding. Like, he took it to a different level of atmosphere. than what it was when he initially took it over, or even when he was initially introduced to it. So that speaks for itself too. It is a duality, right? He represents both the best and the worst of people, in my mind.
I think he's still the reason why we as fans get to enjoy professional wrestling on a international level, on a global level, on a commercialized level, and I don't think you can ever really take that away from him. Um, I think he has a lot of flaws that a lot of rich people have. I don't think he's unique in some of his sins, and there's a lot of them. I think his original intention may have been not so cruel, but the more you go along and the more bulletproof you become, it's hard not to become a pretty shitty person by the end of it. And they say, don't know your heroes, right? Um, I think a lot can say that about Vince McMahon in the sense that his business acumen is quite strong for the thing that he found what worked for him, but the human element is not. So the duality of man is a good one. I like that one.
I would agree.
Thanks.
We got to give you your shout outs when it's warranted.
Yeah, I
you said it
have
nice
broken
and
clocks, right?
yeah, you said it nice and succinctly too, which is extra points.
Hey,
Uh,
progress, evolution is a mystery.
oh God. I
Full
think
of change that no one sees.
that wraps up the Mr. McMahon doc. I'm genuinely curious what Netflix has planned for WWE content outside of um, the actual televised shows. I'm curious if they get WWE involved. I did notice that it was number 3. I watched the last episode last night, and it was number 3 in Canada on my Netflix feed. So
top 10 in the U.S. I didn't see where, but I know it's top 10.
I think last I checked, it was number 4, but that could have. I mean, that was as of I think either yesterday or earlier today, so that could have changed by now. But it was top 5 for sure.
yeah, I'm curious the other kinds of content that they put out. I mean, they put out very little. They had a couple things with WWE on Netflix, but they just like escape the Undertaker's mansion and crap like that. But
PG bullshit.
yeah,
Oh,
but
those are so fun.
I'm curious if they get some of the talent involved in reality. Like there's a lot of stuff that Netflix puts out. Do they get them involved in reality TV or some of their game shows, or do more documentaries, a la what Peacock is doing, or do they just not do any of that and just let the product stand alone? I'm genuinely curious what Netflix does, seeing the reception they would get from this documentary and knowing that they have almost keys to the castle in 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, Logan Paul even alluded to it too when he was talking on his podcast with Dom or whatever. Like, he's like, because he's obviously big into social media and the current zeitgeist as far as that goes. But like, talking about Netflix specifically, he's like, yeah, man, there's no sponsors. Like, we can effectively, might have been a bit of hyperbole, but we can do whatever we want. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what kind of creative liberties that they'll take, not only with the weekly shows, but also with like, right, like, I mean, Netflix has how many spinoffs? There's how many like interactive little things they have on Netflix with other things. So, I mean, you could see a whole different era of programming in WWE, things we wouldn't have imagined we'd see before.
You're gonna start
But
seeing.
I have to imagine.
Sorry, you're gonna start seeing some of the talent on Love Is Blind.
Yeah, honest, honest to God, I think that's what we're. I think that's where we're headed. Yeah, like on Squid Game or some shit like that. You know what I mean? Or like, what are some of the original series like?
They have the
I mean, but that right, that
I
opens.
guess season 3, we'll see some.
Yeah, I mean, it opens up a whole new realm of possibility.
There's a lot of talented people in that locker room too. People that can put on good performances, and they have Hollywood experience, television experience, theater experience in some cases, like Cody. Like, there's some talented people
the guys like
in front of the camera.
Well, like, that a guy like The Miz, especially in his current line of life, is like salivating at the chops right now. Like, he's already experienced enough as is, but this is going to be like a whole new thing for him. Just more stuff to add to his portfolio. Like, and he's moving out of Cali too, so he's going to actually be able to afford more shit. And I feel like this new opportunity with Netflix is definitely going to appeal a lot to him, especially if he's trying to wind down his in-ring career too, which I could possibly see coming at some point in the near future, within 5 years, I want to say.
I feel like they did this on Roku, where they did like a little mini series on recruitment in WWE. I think Netflix would be a great platform for Tough Enough to come back.
Absolutely. But too, like, I feel like there's so much that WWE is not capitalizing on. Like, the biggest one in my mind is, and will always be until they bring it back, is going to be Cyber Sunday. You have multiple social media platforms. You have multiple means by which you can interact with fans and come up with a whole bunch of like crazy gimmicky shit and make it fun for people. And you can just have like one special, like one little PLE a year, and make it for the fans like that, and have them engage with WWE through Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, and like boost the fucking numbers that way.
It's surprising they haven't brought it back.
This is the era for that. The era. There's never been an era like this one for a concept like Cyber Sunday. Crossing fingers.
That essentially wraps up our show, though, for this Wednesday, October 2nd. What we got on tap next week? We're going to review Bad Blood, and we'll go over Wrestle Dream again. Well, not again, but we'll go over Wrestle Dream, some predictions associated with that.
It won't go as long.
No. Again, it seems like every time it's like, longest episode ever. We're right on this one again.
No, I don't know if we're going to break this record for a while.
No, I hope not. They're a little bit exhausting, I won't lie. Yeah. It's already close to 10 o'clock my time.
There was a lot to discuss in this one, though. Like, there were 3 different things we went over. So I hope and think we don't achieve this kind of runtime again. Like, we're kind of breaching into OSW territory at this point.
Yeah, it's a bit
3-hour spiels.
Admittedly a bit much, but we'll just cut the AEW content next time, and it'll make it a half an hour shorter, and we'll all be happy.
Hey, we all, i.e., Donny.
But yeah, the next couple of weeks we'll be reviewing shows and predicting shows. And then into the tail end of October, we're a little up in the air on what we're going to do with some of that stuff. But stay tuned as we get into spooky season, and Crown Jewel will be shortly after that in early November.
Spookiest show available.
Who wants to plug socials one more time? I'll do it. Fuck it. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on X. At least as long as we're posting on there. We should be live this Saturday for Bad Blood. One of us. Maybe I'll start commenting. I show up like once a month to comment, but I feel like I should comment just a little bit more often. So maybe I'll if I can
is the sizzle that we need.
Yeah, if I can
going off into fights, and you got me getting people to follow us, and then you have Donny just adding a little spice to the steak.
Yeah, if I can get and confirm that I'll watch Bad Blood live, I'll get on the X wagon and live tweet Bad Blood. That's it. Thanks, guys, for coming out tonight, and
absolutely,
Pierce, you know what to do.
Well, as always, thanks for stopping in the Ope-Eh 3-Way. Have a beer on us. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.